You have just woken up as a honey badger. For the next 3 hours, you are going to experience relentless thirst, a swarm of bee stings, and even a cobra fight. And this won't be easy, so good luck. But before we get into this journey of honey badger, I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe, like the video, and why not leave a comment on where you are tuning in from and what animal you want me to cover next. Now let's begin this epic adventure together. You're awake, but you don't want to be. It's not the gentle stirring of a house cat stretching in a sunbeam, or the gradual consciousness of a human reaching for their phone. No, this is the harsh, immediate awakening of an animal whose life depends on split-second decisions. Your body jolts from sleep in the cramped darkness of your underground burrow, muscles already tense before your brain has fully processed where you are. The air around you is stale and thick, carrying the musty scent of earth and your own body heat trapped in this narrow tunnel you've carved into the hard African soil. Your limbs feel stiff and cramped from sleeping, curled in a space barely wider than your own body. Every joint aches as you shift position, your spine protesting against the unforgiving walls of packed dirt that have been your bed for the night. But here's the thing about being a honey badger. Comfort is a luxury you simply cannot afford. Your stomach gnaws at itself with a familiar emptiness, a constant reminder that every calorie burned must be earned back through dangerous, exhausting work. The low blood sugar makes your head feel light, your reactions just a fraction slower than they should be, when every second could mean the difference between a successful hunt and becoming someone else's breakfast. You face an immediate dilemma that captures the cruel mathematics of your existence. Stay in the burrow where you're relatively safe but burn through your remaining energy reserves keeping warm, or venture out into a world full of predators while you're still groggy and vulnerable. Neither option is good. Both could kill you. Above your head, separated by just a few feet of dirt, you can hear the first tentative sounds of the African dawn beginning to stir, the high-pitched buzz of insects starting their daily routines. In the distance, the distinctive whooping call of hyenas, those bone-crushing scavengers who wouldn't hesitate to turn you into a midnight snack if they caught you in the open. These sounds force another impossible decision. Leave now, while the nocturnal predators are still active but before the day's heat makes foraging unbearable, or wait until full sunrise when the big cats and hyenas retreat to shade, knowing that every minute you delay is precious foraging time lost forever. Your body makes the choice for you. The cold is seeping into your bones, and you can feel your metabolism working harder just to maintain basic functions. Stay here much longer, and you'll be too weak to hunt effectively when you do emerge. The brutal logic of survival demands movement. Even though movement means danger, you begin the careful process of listening, your ears straining for any sound that doesn't belong. The soft pad of paws on sand, the rustle of grass that isn't moved by wind, the nearly silent wing beat of an owl, still hunting in the pre-dawn gloom. Your nose twitches, processing the complex layered scents that drift down through the burrow entrance. Each smell tells a story. Which animals passed by in the night, how recently, whether they were hunting or simply traveling through your territory. This is what it means to be a honey badger. Every moment of consciousness is a careful calculation of risk versus reward, energy expenditure versus caloric gain. There are no lazy mornings, no time to ease into the day. From the instant you wake, you're already behind on calories, behind on territory patrol, behind on the endless tasks that keep you alive in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. Your thick claws grip the earthen floor of your burrow as you prepare to move. Those claws are your primary tools for survival. Digging implements, weapons, and climbing aids, all rolled into one. But even they show the wear of constant use, slightly blunted from endless excavation, small chips and cracks that speak to the relentless physical demands of your existence. The darkness around you feels both protective and oppressive. Soon, you'll have to leave this small pocket of security and face another day in the harsh Kalahari, where everything from the blazing sun to the smallest insect seems designed to kill you. But first, you have to make it through these dangerous transition moments between night and day, when predators from both shifts overlap in their hunting schedules. This is how every single day begins when you're born a honey badger, not with hope or anticipation, but with the cold, hard assessment of how you might manage to survive the next 24 hours. Cool sand, stiff joints, old scars. Your body tells the story of your life in ways that would horrify most creatures. But for a honey badger, scars are simply proof you've survived another day. As you stretch in the confines of your burrow, every movement sends messages through a network of old injuries, healed wounds, and chronic aches that serve as a living catalogue of near-death experiences. The cool sand beneath your belly provides some relief from the stiffness, but it's a temporary comfort. Your paws are cracked and weathered from constant digging through abrasive soil and rocky terrain. The pads that once might have been soft are now thick and calloused, split in places where the demands of excavation have exceeded even your body's remarkable ability to adapt. Each step sends small jolts of discomfort through feet that have never known rest. Your claws, those magnificent weapons that define so much of what you are, show the accumulated damage of years fighting for survival. They're worn down from endless digging, chipped from battles with other honey badgers defending territory, and permanently stained with the dirt of 1,000 burrows. What should be gleaming weapons look more like well-used tools, functional but battle-scarred. Running your tongue over your fur, you can feel the raised ridges of scar tissue that crisscross your body like a roadmap of violence. There's the long line across your shoulder from that territorial dispute 3 seasons ago, when another male challenged your claim to a particularly rich foraging area. The fight lasted only minutes, but both of you walked away marked for life. You won, barely, but the victory cost you weeks of painful healing, during which hunting became an exercise in agony. Your neck bears the distinctive puncture marks from a leopard's attempt to make you into dinner last year. The thick, loose skin that makes honey badgers so difficult for predators to kill probably saved your life that night, but the memory lives on in tender spots that ache whenever the weather changes. That loose skin is evolution's gift to your species. It allows you to twist and turn even when gripped by powerful jaws, often enabling you to bite back while supposedly helpless. Joint pain is your constant companion now, a reminder that your body isn't designed for the endless physical punishment you inflict upon it. Your shoulders, built for digging, creak with each movement after nights spent excavating new burrows or expanding existing ones. Your hips, stressed by the constant crawling through tight spaces and sudden sprints from danger, protest with sharp twinges that you've learned to work through because stopping means dying. The advantage of emerging before dawn isn't just about avoiding the day's crushing heat, though that's certainly part of it. It's also about timing your movement to minimize overlap with the peak hunting hours of your most dangerous predators. But this early hour brings its own risks, as nocturnal hunters like leopards and caracals are still active, their night vision giving them a significant advantage in the dim pre-dawn light. Your grooming routine isn't about vanity or comfort, it's about survival maintenance. Each lick and nibble removes parasites that would otherwise drain your strength, clears debris from wounds that could become infected, and keeps your sensory organs clean and functional. Your ears need to be free of wax and dirt to detect the approach of danger. Your nose must be clear to read the complex scent messages that serve as your primary navigation system. Every movement costs energy, and energy is the currency of survival in the harsh African wilderness. The calories you burn stretching and grooming are calories that must be replaced through dangerous foraging missions. This creates a constant tension between the maintenance your body requires and the risks involved in obtaining the resources to fuel that maintenance. Your muscles, while powerful for your size, carry the chronic tension of an animal that can never fully relax. Even in sleep, some part of your nervous system remains alert for danger, ready to explode into action at the first sign of threat. This hypervigilance takes its toll, leaving you with muscle knots and tension that would cripple a less hardy creature. The temperature differential between your body heat and the cool sand creates a brief moment of relief, but you know it won't last. Soon, the African sun will turn this landscape into a furnace, and the same sand that now soothes your aching joints will become too hot to touch. Every comfort in your world is temporary, every moment of relief borrowed against future hardship. This daily inventory of pain and damage isn't self-pity, it's crucial intelligence gathering. You need to know which injuries might slow you down in a chase, which joints might give out during a crucial dig, which scars remain tender enough to affect your fighting ability. Your survival depends on an accurate assessment of your physical capabilities, because overestimating your condition is often fatal in the unforgiving mathematics of predator and prey. First sniff scan of the burrow mouth. The entrance to your burrow might as well be a newspaper, if newspapers were written in the language of scent and told stories of violence, territory disputes, and the constant struggle for survival that defines life in the African wilderness. As you approach the opening, your nose becomes a sophisticated chemical analysis laboratory, processing layers of information that could mean the difference between a successful foraging trip and walking into a fatal ambush. The night air carries with it a complex bouquet of messages, each scent telling you exactly who passed by your territory while you slept, how recently they were here, and most importantly, whether they pose an immediate threat. Your nostrils flare as you sample the air, your brain automatically sorting and cataloging each molecular signature with the precision of a forensic scientist. The sharp, musky odor of jackal hangs in the air like a warning sign. These cunning scavengers hunt in pairs or small packs, and their presence near your burrow is never good news. From the intensity of the scent, you can tell they passed through sometime in the early hours before dawn, probably following their noses towards some distant carrion. But jackals are opportunists, and if they caught your scent, they might have marked this location in their memory as a place worth investigating again. Layered beneath the jackal scent is something more concerning, the distinctive musk of another honey badger. This isn't unusual in itself. Your species maintains overlapping territories and occasional encounters are inevitable. But this particular scent carries the aggressive pheromone signature of a rival male. And from its freshness, he was here very recently. The implications are troubling. Either he's testing the boundaries of your territory, looking for signs of weakness or opportunity, or he's already begun the process of claiming this area as his own. Your ears swivel like radar dishes as you pause in your scent analysis, listening for any sound that might indicate immediate danger. The African dawn is never truly silent, but you've learned to distinguish between the normal acoustic landscape and the subtle changes that signal predator activity. The insects continue their constant chorus, which is reassuring. They tend to go quiet when larger predators are moving through the area. But then you catch it, a scent that makes your muscles tense involuntarily. Snake, not just any snake, but the chemical signature of something venomous, possibly a puff adder or even a cape cobra. The scent trail suggests it passed near your burrow entrance sometime during the night, following its own hunting patterns. Snakes often position themselves near burrow entrances, knowing that emerging prey animals make easy targets in those vulnerable seconds when they're transitioning from the safety of underground to the dangers of the surface world. The complexity of reading these scent layers requires constant mental processing that would exhaust most animals, but for a honey badger, it's as natural as breathing. Each molecule of information is cross-referenced against your mental database of threats, opportunities, and territorial intelligence. You can distinguish between the scent of a snake that's simply passing through and one that might be actively hunting in your immediate area. Wind direction becomes crucial in this chemical reconnaissance. The night breezes carry scents from different directions, and you need to determine not just what was here, but where these various threats and competitors might be now. A scent trail that leads away from your burrow is less concerning than one that seems to circle back or concentrate in your immediate vicinity. Your nose also picks up the faint traces of smaller prey animals, the distinctive musty odor of rodents, the sharp scent of ground-dwelling birds, the earthy smell of insects and grubs. These are the scents of opportunity, the chemical signatures of potential meals that could make the dangerous journey above ground worthwhile. But even these seemingly positive signs must be weighed against the risks, because wherever prey animals concentrate, predators are sure to follow. The pause at the burrow mouth creates its own danger. Every second you spend analyzing scents is a second you remain vulnerable to ambush. Some predators, particularly the big cats, are masters of patience. They can remain motionless for hours near known prey routes, waiting for exactly this moment when a potential victim emerges and stops to assess the situation. Your thick skin and powerful build give you advantages in direct confrontation, but even honey badgers have learned to respect the killing power of a leopard's ambush or the bone-crushing bite of a spotted hyena. The key to survival isn't fearlessness, it's intelligent risk assessment, combined with lightning-fast reactions when danger materializes. The scent information you're gathering now will influence every decision you make for the next several hours. Which direction to head for foraging, which areas to avoid, whether to stick close to thick cover or risk crossing open ground for better hunting opportunities. This isn't paranoia. It's the sophisticated threat assessment system that has kept your species alive in one of the world's most dangerous ecosystems for millions of years. Dry season thirst problem. Water is life, and in the Kalahari during dry season, life becomes a desperate mathematics problem where every calculation could be your last. As you emerge from your burrow into the pre-dawn darkness, the reality of your situation hits you like a physical weight. It's been 3 days since you've had access to clean, fresh water, and your body is beginning to send increasingly urgent distress signals that can't be ignored much longer. The dry season transforms the landscape into a moonscape of cracked earth and withered vegetation. What were once seasonal water holes are now nothing more than cracked clay bowls, their bottoms baked hard as concrete under the relentless African sun. The few permanent water sources that exist are heavily contested territories where predators gather in uneasy truces, making them incredibly dangerous for a solitary animal like yourself. Your tongue feels thick and sticky in your mouth, and swallowing has become increasingly difficult. This isn't just discomfort, it's your body's early warning system telling you that dehydration is beginning to affect your basic physiological functions. Your blood is literally becoming thicker, making your heart work harder to pump it through your system. Your kidneys are concentrating your urine to dangerous levels, trying to conserve every possible drop of moisture. The irony of being a honey badger is that much of your prey actually contains the water you need to survive, but catching that prey requires energy and alertness that dehydration steadily erodes. It's a cruel feedback loop. You need water to hunt effectively, but you need to hunt successfully to get water. Every day, the equation becomes more unforgiving. You've learned to read the subtle signs that indicate advancing drought conditions. The soil beneath your paws has changed texture, becoming powdery and loose instead of having the slight moisture content that indicates underground water reserves. The insects, which usually provide both food and moisture, have retreated deeper underground or entered dormant states to wait out the dry spell. Even the hardy desert plants are showing stress, their leaves curled and brittle, offering no relief even if you were desperate enough to try extracting moisture from vegetation. Your body has remarkable adaptations for surviving in arid conditions, but they're not magic. You can concentrate your urine to levels that would be toxic to many mammals, and your kidneys can extract moisture with impressive efficiency. Your thick skin reduces water loss through perspiration, and your behavioral patterns, seeking shade during the hottest parts of the day, help minimize moisture loss. But all of these adaptations only delay the inevitable if you can't find an actual water source. The physiological effects of chronic dehydration are starting to manifest in ways that directly threaten your survival abilities. Your reaction times are slightly slower, your coordination less precise. The saliva in your mouth, essential for processing food and maintaining oral health, has become scanty and thick. Your eyes feel dry and gritty, affecting your vision at precisely the time when sharp eyesight could mean the difference between spotting prey and missing a meal. Temperature regulation becomes increasingly difficult as dehydration progresses. Without adequate fluid levels, your body loses its ability to cool itself efficiently through the limited sweating that honey badgers do through their paw pads and other specialized areas. This creates a dangerous spiral where heat stress compounds dehydration, and dehydration worsens heat stress. The decision-making process becomes a grim calculation of energy expenditure versus potential water gain. Do you travel the dangerous 15 kilometers to the nearest known water source, burning precious calories and exposing yourself to predators along established game trails? Or do you stay local and hope to extract enough moisture from prey to sustain yourself, knowing that local prey is becoming increasingly scarce as other animals also feel the pressure of the dry season? Your mental map of the territory includes detailed knowledge of every possible water source within a day's travel, but the dry season has systematically eliminated most of them. That small depression where rainwater collected after the last storm, bone dry. The muddy seepage at the base of the rocky outcrop, reduced to cracked earth. Even the usually reliable spots where morning dew might accumulate have become unreliable as humidity levels drop. The few water sources that remain active become incredibly dangerous congregation points. Every predator and prey animal in the region knows about them, creating situations where natural enemies are forced into proximity by shared desperation. Lions, leopards, hyenas, and dozens of smaller predators all converge on these areas, turning what should be life-saving water into potential death traps. Your thick, loose skin that serves you so well in fights becomes a liability in terms of water conservation. While it protects you from bites and stings, it also represents a large surface area from which precious moisture can evaporate. Every breath you take expels water vapor that your body can't afford to lose, but you can't stop breathing any more than you can stop the sun from rising. The psychological effects of chronic thirst are as dangerous as the physical ones. Dehydration affects cognitive function, making you more likely to take dangerous risks or make poor decisions about predator avoidance. The desperate drive to find water can override the careful risk assessment that normally keeps you alive, leading to increasingly reckless behavior as the situation becomes more dire. Termites, breakfast or nothing. Breakfast, when you're a honey badger, isn't about choosing between cereal or toast. It's about scanning the landscape for the telltale signs of termite mounds and calculating whether the enormous energy expenditure required to break into these insect fortresses will actually yield enough protein to justify the effort. And right now, as your stomach gnaws at itself with increasing urgency, those earthen towers scattered across the savannah represent your best shot at getting something, anything, into your system before the day's heat makes hunting impossible. Termite mounds are engineering marvels that put human construction to shame. These towering structures, some reaching several feet in height, are built with a cement-like mixture of soil, saliva, and feces that dries harder than concrete. The termites didn't build them to be convenient snack dispensers for hungry honey badgers. They built them to be impregnable fortresses that can withstand everything from flash floods to the claws of determined predators. Your approach to a promising mound requires the kind of strategic thinking that most people associate with military operations. You circle the structure first, nose working overtime, to detect signs of active galleries beneath the surface. Dead termite mounds are just monuments to wasted effort. You need to find colonies that are alive, busy, and worth the massive caloric investment you're about to make. The surface of an active mound tells stories if you know how to read them. Fresh mud tubes snaking up the sides indicate recent construction activity. The slightly different coloration of certain areas suggests ongoing maintenance work. Most importantly, you can detect the faint but distinctive chemical signatures that active termite colonies release. Pheromone trails that to your sensitive nose are as obvious as neon signs. But finding an active colony is just the beginning of your problems. Actually getting to the termites requires a sustained assault on what amounts to biological concrete. Your claws, already worn from constant use, take a beating as you begin the exhausting process of excavation. The outer crust resists your initial attempts, forcing you to work systematically to find weak points where construction gaps or natural weathering have created vulnerabilities. The labor involved is staggering. You're essentially performing demolition work with hand tools, and every scrape and gouge sends vibrations through your already aching joints. Your shoulders burn with the effort, your neck muscles strain as you angle your head for maximum leverage, and your paws begin to bleed as the abrasive material wears through even your thick pads. Meanwhile, the termites aren't passive victims in this scenario. The moment your claws breach their outer defenses, the entire colony mobilizes into a coordinated defense response that would make military strategists proud. Soldier termites, equipped with enlarged mandibles designed specifically for combat, pour out of the breach you've created. Their bites, while individually small, quickly accumulate into a constellation of sharp, burning pain across your snout and paws. But the bites are just the beginning of the termites' defensive arsenal. Many species deploy chemical weapons that make the experience of raiding their colonies genuinely miserable. Formic acid, the same compound that makes ant bites so painful, gets sprayed directly onto your sensitive nose and around your eyes. The burning sensation is immediate and intense, and it doesn't fade quickly. Your eyes water uncontrollably, your nose runs, and every breath through your nostrils feels like inhaling fire. The payoff, when you finally break through to the active galleries, is a collection of tiny, protein-rich morsels that individually provide almost no nutritional value. Each termite is barely a mouthful, and you need to consume hundreds of them to make any meaningful dent in your caloric deficit. It's like trying to fill a bucket one drop at a time, while someone continuously pokes holes in the bottom. Your feeding technique becomes a frantic race against time and the termite's defensive mobilization. You extend your tongue deep into the galleries, using its rough surface to scrape up as many insects as possible with each probe. But the termites are retreating deeper into their fortress, sealing off compromised tunnels and evacuating their most valuable members, the reproductive adults and larvae that represent the colony's future. The energy mathematics of termite hunting are brutally unforgiving. The calories you burn during the excavation process often exceed what you gain from the actual feeding. You're running a biological deficit, spending energy you don't have in the hope of gaining energy you desperately need. It's a gamble that becomes increasingly desperate as your body's reserves dwindle. Your thick skin provides some protection from the termites' defensive attacks, but your nose, eyes, and the inside of your mouth remain vulnerable to their chemical arsenal. The formic acid creates a burning sensation that persists long after you've finished feeding, turning every breath into a reminder of the price you pay for each meager meal. The frustration builds as you realize that despite your best efforts, despite the pain and exhaustion and chemical burns, you're still operating at a caloric deficit. The handful of termites you've managed to consume represents a snack, not a meal. Your energy reserves continue to dwindle, and the day's hunting challenges still lie ahead. This is the reality of honey badger nutrition during lean times. Every meal is a battle, every calorie is earned through suffering, and even your victories barely keep you alive for another day. The romantic notion of wild animals living in harmony with nature dissolves when you're actually experiencing the brutal mathematics of survival, where the difference between life and death can be measured in the protein content of a few dozen insects. Raiding rodent runways. The faint, musky scent that hangs in the morning air like an invisible roadmap tells you everything you need to know about opportunity and frustration in equal measure. Somewhere beneath your paws, a network of tunnels carries the distinctive odor signature of gerbils or bush rats, small rodents whose burrow systems represent mobile protein packages, if you can actually catch them, and exercises in futile exhaustion, if you can't. Rodent hunting is archaeological work combined with extreme sports, requiring you to become both detective and demolition expert simultaneously. The surface signs are subtle but readable to your trained senses. Barely visible tracks in the sand, tiny scattered droppings, and most importantly, the almost imperceptible scent trails that mark the entrances and exits of underground highway systems that can extend for dozens of meters in every direction. Your excavation technique has been refined through years of hard-earned experience and countless failures. You begin with rapid, powerful strokes that send sand flying in rooster tails behind you, your claws working like organic machinery to open preliminary access points. The goal isn't to dig pretty holes, it's to create maximum disruption in minimum time, hopefully collapsing tunnel sections and forcing any occupants to flee toward predictable escape routes. But rodent burrow systems are evolutionary masterpieces designed specifically to thwart predators like you. These aren't simple straight tunnels. They're complex, three-dimensional mazes with multiple levels, emergency exits, food storage chambers, and nursery areas. The occupants have had millions of years to perfect their underground architecture, and it shows in the frustrating efficiency of their defensive designs. The physical demands of this type of hunting push your body to its absolute limits. Your shoulders, already aching from the earlier termite raid, now burn with the sustained effort of high-speed excavation. Each powerful stroke sends shock waves through your joints, and the constant impact begins to numb your pores. Sand gets into your eyes, your nose, your ears, creating a gritty discomfort that compounds the exhaustion. Dust inhalation becomes a serious problem as your digging intensifies. The fine particles kicked up by your excavation work get deep into your respiratory system, causing coughing fits that waste precious oxygen and energy. Your lungs, already working hard to fuel your physical efforts, now have to deal with the additional burden of filtering out foreign particles with every breath. The tunnel collapses you create are double-edged weapons. While they can trap or disorient rodents, they also represent wasted effort if you've misjudged the tunnel layout. Each collapse fills with loose sand that must be cleared before you can continue your pursuit, and time is always working against you. The longer you spend on any single excavation, the more energy you burn and the less time you have for other hunting opportunities. Your mental mapping skills become crucial as you try to predict tunnel layouts based on surface signs and the logic of rodent behavior. Gerbils tend to create escape tunnels that exit several meters away from their main entrances, usually in areas with good cover. Bush rats prefer more linear systems with fewer but more carefully concealed exits. Understanding these patterns can mean the difference between a successful hunt and hours of futile digging. The moment of contact, when your claws finally encounter fur and flesh instead of empty tunnel, triggers an explosion of activity that tests every aspect of your hunting skills. Rodents are incredibly fast and agile, capable of changing direction instantaneously in tight spaces where your larger size becomes a disadvantage. The initial grab is crucial. Miss it, and your prey will vanish into backup tunnels you haven't even discovered yet. But even when you do everything right, even when your excavation strategy is perfect and your initial strike successful, the energy mathematics remain unforgiving. A single small rodent, while more nutritious than a handful of termites, still provides only a fraction of the calories you've expended in the hunting process. You're playing a numbers game where you need multiple successful hunts just to break even, let alone build up energy reserves. The frustration of empty chambers is a constant companion in rodent hunting. Your nose tells you the tunnels are active. Your excavation technique is flawless. But when you finally break into what should be an occupied nest chamber, you find nothing but the lingering scent of rodents that escaped through exits you never located. Hours of backbreaking work result in nothing more than a collection of holes in the ground and a growing energy deficit. Your thick claws, so effective for digging, become liabilities when trying to extract small, fast-moving prey from narrow tunnels. The same tools that can tear through concrete hard termite mounds lack the precision needed for delicate capture work. It's like trying to perform surgery with sledgehammers, technically possible, but far from optimal. The constant failures take a psychological toll that compounds the physical exhaustion. Each empty burrow, each escaped rodent, each hour of futile digging reinforces the brutal reality that in the wild, effort doesn't guarantee results. You can do everything right and still go hungry, simply because your prey species have evolved to be just as good at escaping as you are at hunting. Finally, when persistence and technique align with luck, you manage to secure a small rodent, perhaps a young gerbil that wasn't quite fast enough to reach its emergency exit. The brief surge of protein and fat provides a momentary respite from the gnawing hunger. But even as you consume your hard-won prey, your body is already calculating the deficit. The calories gained barely offset the calories spent, leaving you still operating in survival mode with no comfortable margin for error. Flies, fleas, and ticks, constant itch. Living in your own skin becomes a special kind of torment when that skin serves as a mobile ecosystem for dozens of different parasite species, each one perfectly adapted to make your life as miserable as possible while slowly draining your strength and health. As you pause between hunting efforts, the constant irritation of your unwanted passengers demands attention that you can't afford to give, but can't afford to ignore. Your ears have become five-star hotels for ticks of various species, each one a tiny vampire that has attached itself to the warm, blood-rich environment of your ear canals. These aren't just minor irritations. They're sophisticated parasites that inject anticoagulants to keep your blood flowing freely while they feed. The itching sensation is constant and maddening, made worse by the fact that your paws can't reach the deepest parts of your ears where the largest ticks have established themselves. The belly area, with its slightly thinner skin and rich blood supply, hosts a thriving community of fleas that have turned your daily existence into a constant fidgeting nightmare. These tiny acrobats are nearly impossible to catch, capable of jumping distances that would be equivalent to a human leaping over a skyscraper. Every time you think you've pinned one down with your teeth or claws, it vanishes in a physics-defying bound to another part of your body. Your attempts at parasite removal become contortion exercises that would challenge a professional gymnast. You twist and bend, trying to reach every part of your body with your mouth, but your anatomy simply wasn't designed for complete self-grooming. There are areas along your back, behind your shoulders, and around your neck that remain perpetually out of reach, becoming safe havens where parasites can feed undisturbed. The psychological effects of constant parasitic irritation are as draining as the physical ones. The itching creates a low-level stress response that never fully subsides, keeping your nervous system in a state of chronic activation. You can't fully relax, can't achieve the deep, restorative sleep that your exhausted body desperately needs, because some part of your consciousness is always aware of the crawling, biting, itching sensations across your skin. Tick removal, when you can actually reach the parasites, becomes a delicate surgical procedure performed with crude instruments. Your teeth and claws aren't designed for precision work, and the tick's strategy of embedding their heads deep into your skin makes removal dangerous. Pull too hard or at the wrong angle, and you risk leaving the head buried in your flesh, where it can cause infections that are far more dangerous than the original parasite. Your grooming routine, which should be a simple maintenance activity, becomes an exhausting battle against an enemy that reproduces faster than you can eliminate it. For every tick you successfully remove, 2 more seem to appear. The fleas are even worse. Their reproductive cycle is so rapid that killing adults barely makes a dent in the population explosion happening in your fur. The areas of your body that you can't reach with your own mouth become targets of opportunity for the most aggressive parasites. These zones develop into hotspots of concentrated irritation where multiple species of bloodsuckers establish feeding colonies. The itching in these areas becomes so intense that you resort to desperate measures, rubbing against rough surfaces like thorny bushes or rocky outcrops. But even this rubbing strategy comes with its own problems. The thorns and rough surfaces that provide temporary relief from itching also create micro-injuries in your skin, tiny cuts and abrasions that become entry points for infections. You're forced to choose between the constant torment of parasites and the risk of introducing more serious health problems through self-inflicted wounds. The energy drain from parasitic infestation is insidious and cumulative. Each tick, each flea, each mite represents a tiny leak in your biological energy budget. Individually, they're minor inconveniences. Collectively, they can drain enough blood and nutrients to significantly impact your hunting ability, healing capacity, and overall health. It's death by 1,000 tiny cuts, except the cuts are constantly multiplying. Your sleep quality suffers dramatically under the constant assault of parasitic irritation. The deep, restorative sleep phases that are crucial for physical recovery and immune system function become virtually impossible to achieve. You drift in and out of fitful, shallow sleep cycles, never fully resting, always partially alert to the sensation of tiny creatures moving across your skin. The psychological adaptation to chronic parasitic irritation involves a kind of mental compartmentalization that comes at its own cost. You learn to function despite the constant discomfort, but this requires maintaining a level of stoic endurance that adds to your overall stress load. The mental energy required to ignore pain and irritation is energy that can't be devoted to hunting, navigation, or predator avoidance. Parasite loads tend to increase during times of stress, poor nutrition, or illness, exactly when you can least afford the additional burden. It's a cruel feedback loop where the conditions that make you most vulnerable to parasites are the same conditions that make it hardest to deal with parasitic infestations. When you're already weakened by hunger or injury, the last thing you need is an army of bloodsuckers making the situation worse. The seasonal cycles of parasite activity add another layer of complexity to an already miserable situation. During certain times of year, flea populations explode in response to environmental conditions, turning a manageable irritation into an overwhelming infestation. Tick activity peaks during specific weather patterns, creating periods when simply moving through grassland becomes an exercise in parasite collection. Sun heat and the low shade struggle. The African sun doesn't gradually warm the landscape like a gentle friend. It attacks with the sudden, overwhelming intensity of a blast furnace that transforms the environment from merely uncomfortable to potentially lethal in what feels like minutes. As the first rays breach the horizon, you can literally feel the temperature differential beginning to shift, and you know that your window for effective hunting is closing faster than a predator's jaws. The mathematics of heat management become a life or death calculation that dominates every decision you make once the sun clears the horizon. Your thick, dark fur, which provides essential protection against thorns, bites, and claws, becomes a liability that traps heat against your body like a biological oven. The same coat that saved your life during last night's leopard encounter now threatens to cook you alive as the temperature climbs toward levels that can cause organ failure. Shade, in this environment, becomes more valuable than gold, more precious than water, more essential than food itself. But finding adequate shade presents its own deadly challenges. The sparse vegetation of the Kalahari doesn't offer the generous canopy coverage of a forest. Instead, you're competing with every other creature in the area for the few scattered patches of relief provided by isolated thorn bushes, rocky overhangs, and the occasional acacia tree. Your search for shade isn't a casual stroll. It's a desperate race against rising temperatures that could literally kill you within hours. Every minute you spend in direct sunlight after the critical threshold is reached brings you closer to heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and the kind of organ damage that can end your life, even if you eventually find shelter. The urgency creates a terrible conflict with your need to continue foraging, because every moment spent hunting is a moment of dangerous heat exposure. The competition for limited shade resources forces you into proximity with other animals that you would normally avoid, creating tense standoffs where territorial aggression meets shared desperation. A small thorn bush that provides barely enough shade for one animal might attract multiple species, all trying to crowd into the same inadequate shelter. These situations are powder kegs of interspecies conflict, where the usual predator-prey relationships become complicated by mutual heat stress. Your body's thermoregulation systems, remarkable as they are, have distinct limits that the African sun routinely exceeds. Panting becomes your primary cooling mechanism, but it's a strategy that comes with its own costs. The rapid breathing required for evaporative cooling through your respiratory system burns additional energy and accelerates dehydration, two things you can't afford when you're already operating on dangerously thin margins. The ground temperature rises even faster than the air temperature, turning the earth beneath your paws into something approaching a frying pan. Your thick paw pads provide some protection, but prolonged contact with sun-heated sand or rock can cause actual burns. You find yourself doing an increasingly frantic dance, lifting your paws in sequence to minimize contact time with surfaces that could damage your feet. Heat mirages begin to shimmer across the landscape, creating visual distortions that make hunting even more difficult. The wavering air distorts your depth perception and makes it nearly impossible to judge distances accurately. Prey animals that appear to be within striking distance turn out to be much farther away, leading to failed hunts and wasted energy bursts that you can't afford in the rising heat. Your retreat to whatever inadequate shade you can find becomes a form of suspended animation. You lie as still as possible, trying to minimize any movement that would generate additional body heat. Your breathing becomes shallow and rapid as your body fights to maintain a core temperature compatible with life. Every few minutes, you're forced to shift position as the angle of the sun eliminates your current shade, beginning a new desperate search for the next pocket of relief. The burrow that provided safety and shelter during the night now calls to you with increasing urgency, but returning to it means abandoning any chance of successful foraging until evening. It's a retreat that guarantees you'll face another night with inadequate calories, but staying above ground much longer could mean not surviving to see that next night at all. Belly-to-ground contact becomes a crucial cooling strategy. But finding ground that's cool enough to provide relief without being hot enough to burn requires constant evaluation and movement. You end up pressing your belly against the earth in a futile attempt to conduct heat away from your body, even though the ground itself is often too hot to provide meaningful relief. The psychological effects of extreme heat stress compound the physical challenges. Your decision-making abilities become impaired as your brain struggles to function in the rising temperatures. The careful risk assessment that normally keeps you alive becomes clouded by the urgent need to find relief, leading to increasingly desperate choices that expose you to predation or injury. Thermoregulation behaviors that work in moderate heat become inadequate as temperatures soar past survival thresholds. Seeking the coolest available ground, positioning yourself to catch any hint of breeze, and timing your breathing to maximize evaporative cooling all become critical survival skills, but they're often insufficient against the overwhelming power of the desert sun at its peak intensity. The cruel irony is that the same sun that's trying to kill you will eventually set, providing relief and allowing you to resume hunting activities. But surviving until sunset requires enduring hours of potentially lethal heat exposure while maintaining enough energy reserves to function when temperatures finally drop. It's a daily gamble where the stakes are literally life and death, and the house always has a significant advantage. Dangers above. Eagles and owls. The sky above you isn't a peaceful blue canopy. It's a hunting ground patrolled by some of Africa's most efficient killing machines, creatures whose evolutionary purpose seems specifically designed to turn honey badgers into airborne takeout meals. Every time you emerge from the relative safety of underground cover, you're entering the territory of predators who can strike with the speed of lightning and the power of falling anvils. Martial eagles, with their 8-foot wingspans and talons that could punch through sheet metal, represent perhaps the most terrifying threat you face from above. These apex aerial predators don't just hunt small prey. They regularly take down animals much larger than you, including small antelopes and even young ostriches. To a martial eagle, a honey badger represents a challenging but manageable meal, especially if they can catch you in the vulnerable position of digging with your head down and your attention focused underground. Your scanning technique for aerial threats requires a delicate balance between vigilance and efficiency. You can't spend all your time looking up. That would make ground-based hunting impossible and leave you vulnerable to terrestrial predators. But you also can't afford to become so focused on your digging or foraging that you miss the shadow of death approaching from above. The solution is a constant rotation of attention, quick upward glances interspersed with your ground-level activities. The visual signature of different raptors becomes crucial intelligence that could save your life. Martial eagles have a distinctive flight silhouette, broad wings held in a slight dihedral, with a massive head and neck that distinguishes them from other large raptors. But identifying the threat is only the first step. Reacting appropriately is what determines whether you live to see another sunset. When you're digging, you're at your most vulnerable to aerial attack. Your head is down, your vision is limited to the immediate excavation area, and your hearing is compromised by the sound of your own claws scraping against soil and rock. This creates a window of opportunity that experienced raptors have learned to exploit. They can approach using terrain features for cover, timing their final approach for moments when you're most deeply focused on your digging activities. Your defensive tactics against aerial predators require split-second timing and an intimate knowledge of local terrain features. Dense shrubs become emergency shelters where even the most determined eagle can't follow. Rocky overhangs provide overhead cover that can stop a raptor's dive. But reaching these safe zones requires you to detect the threat early enough to execute an escape plan. And aerial predators are masters of using sun glare and terrain features to mask their approach until it's almost too late. The transition periods between day and night hunting shifts create overlapping danger zones where both diurnal and nocturnal aerial predators might be active simultaneously. As the sun sets and martial eagles retire for the night, giant eagle owls begin their hunting activities. These nocturnal giants bring a completely different set of challenges: silent flight, exceptional night vision, and hunting strategies adapted for darkness. Night hunting owls employ stealth tactics that make them nearly impossible to detect until they're already committed to their attack. Their specialized wing feathers eliminate the flight noise that might warn potential prey, and their approach is often the first indication you have that you're being hunted from above. By the time you hear the wind displacement from their wings, you have perhaps a fraction of a second to react. Your thick, loose skin provides some protection against raptor attacks, but it's far from a guarantee of survival. Large eagles and owls have talons specifically designed to penetrate thick hide and muscle tissue. Their grip strength can exceed several hundred pounds per square inch, easily enough to crush bones or cause fatal internal injuries. Even if you survive the initial strike, the damage from raptor talons can cause infections or mobility problems that prove fatal over time. The defensive maneuvers you employ against aerial predators are energy-intensive activities that add to your already staggering caloric requirements. Sudden lateral darts, rapid direction changes, and emergency sprints to cover all burn precious calories that must somehow be replaced through successful hunting. It's another layer of the cruel mathematics that governs honey badger survival. Defending yourself costs energy that makes it harder to obtain the resources necessary for continued defense. Your positioning strategy, when forced to hunt in open areas, becomes a complex calculation of sight lines, escape routes, and overhead cover options. You try to stay within sprinting distance of dense vegetation or rocky shelter, but this constraint limits your hunting options and forces you to pass up opportunities that might be too far from adequate cover. The psychological stress of constant aerial threat awareness creates a form of hypervigilance that never fully subsides. Part of your consciousness is always monitoring the sky, passing shadows and movements for signs of approaching danger. This mental load adds to the exhaustion of simply staying alive, creating cognitive fatigue that can impair your decision-making abilities in other crucial survival situations. Timing your surface activities to minimize overlap with peak raptor hunting hours becomes another layer of behavioral complexity. Eagles are most active during thermal updraft periods, when soaring requires minimal energy expenditure. Owls concentrate their hunting during the darkest hours, when their night vision advantages are maximized. Understanding these patterns allows you to schedule your most vulnerable activities for periods when aerial threats are minimized, but it also constrains your foraging schedule in ways that can impact your overall hunting success. Snake encounter, Cape Cobra risk. The distinctive reptilian musk that suddenly floods your nostrils carries with it the unmistakable signature of serious danger. Not just any snake, but the chemical calling card of a Cape Cobra, one of Africa's most venomous serpents, and a creature capable of killing you with a single well-placed bite. The scent is fresh, concentrated, and alarmingly close, indicating that somewhere in your immediate vicinity, several feet of highly evolved killing machine is currently occupying the same space you need to hunt in. Your decision to engage rather than retreat isn't born from recklessness or bravado. It's the calculated desperation of an animal operating so close to starvation that the massive protein reward of a successful snake kill outweighs the equally massive risk of envenomation and death. A Cape Cobra represents more calories than you might obtain from days of conventional hunting, enough to restore your energy reserves and buy you crucial time in the harsh mathematics of survival. But cobras didn't survive millions of years of evolution by being easy prey. This particular serpent is likely between 6 and 8 feet of pure muscle, equipped with fangs that can deliver a neurotoxic venom cocktail capable of causing respiratory paralysis and cardiac arrest within hours. Its reaction time is measured in milliseconds. Its strike range extends to roughly 2/3 of its body length, and its accuracy in defensive situations approaches 100%. Your approach strategy requires every bit of cunning and tactical thinking your species possesses. Direct frontal assaults against venomous snakes are suicidal. Even honey badgers aren't immune to cobra venom, despite popular myths about your species' invulnerability. Instead, you must employ a combination of harassment, feints, and precise timing to create an opening for the one lethal bite that could end this encounter in your favor. The initial contact phase involves a deadly dance of positioning and psychological warfare. You begin with aggressive displays designed to assess the snake's condition, temperament, and defensive capabilities. Loud vocalizations, aggressive posturing, and threatening movements toward the cobra's strike range, all designed to provoke reactions that give you information about your opponent's speed, reach, and likely defensive strategies. The cobra's response tells you everything you need to know about the level of danger you're facing. A healthy, alert serpent will rear into the classic threat display, hood fully expanded, head weaving hypnotically as it tracks your movements and calculates strike opportunities. The height of its defensive posture indicates confidence and physical condition. The steadiness of its weaving pattern reflects neurological health and reaction speed. Your feinting attacks are precisely calculated probes designed to map the snake's strike range and reaction patterns without triggering a full defensive response. You dart toward the cobra's effective range, forcing it to commit to a defensive posture, then retreat before it can launch an actual strike. Each feint provides crucial intelligence about the serpent's reflexes, strike speed, and the extent of its effective defensive perimeter. The tension in these preliminary exchanges is unlike anything most creatures ever experience. Both predator and prey are operating at the absolute limits of their capabilities, each knowing that a single mistake, a moment's hesitation, or a miscalculated distance could result in immediate death. Your heart rate climbs to levels that would be unsustainable in most mammals. Your muscles flood with adrenaline, and your sensory systems achieve a state of hyperacuity that makes time seem to slow down. Reading the cobra's strike preparation becomes a matter of survival-level pattern recognition. The slight tensing of coiled muscle, the infinitesimal shift in head position, the change in the rhythm of defensive weaving. These microscopic tells are the only warnings you'll get before several pounds of angry serpent launches itself toward your head at speeds approaching 20 miles per hour. Your counter-strategy depends on exploiting the brief vulnerability window that exists immediately after a cobra commits to a strike. For a fraction of a second after launching its attack, the snake is extended, off balance, and unable to immediately prepare for a second strike. This microscopic opportunity represents your only chance to close distance and achieve the head grab that could end the encounter successfully. The actual strike sequence unfolds with terrifying speed and precision. The cobra's attack is a coordinated explosion of muscle and venom delivery system, its head traveling in a precise arc designed to intersect with your movement pattern. Your evasion requires not just speed, but the ability to change direction in mid-motion while simultaneously positioning yourself for a counterattack opportunity. Your thick-neck skin provides some protection against glancing bites, but a direct hit from cobra fangs will penetrate even your specialized hide. The loose skin that serves you so well against other predators becomes a liability against venomous snakes, providing a larger target area and potentially allowing fangs to find purchase even during defensive movements. The moment of contact, when your jaws finally close around the cobra's head, represents both victory and the beginning of a new set of dangers. Even with its head secured, the serpent's body continues to writhe and coil with incredible strength, potentially causing crushing injuries to your torso or limbs. The muscular contractions of a dying snake can generate enough force to crack ribs or cause internal injuries. Your killing bite must be precisely placed and maintained despite the snake's violent death throes. Too far back on the head, and the cobra might still be able to inject venom through partially embedded fangs. Too much pressure, and you risk damaging your own teeth and jaws on the snake's heavy skull bones. The balance between effective killing force and self-preservation requires split-second adjustments throughout the final struggle. The adrenaline crash that follows a successful snake kill is immediate and debilitating. Your body, which has been operating at maximum capacity throughout the encounter, suddenly shifts into recovery mode. Your hands shake uncontrollably. Your heart rate remains dangerously elevated, and your breathing comes in rapid, shallow gasps that provide inadequate oxygenation for your exhausted muscles. Snake, venom, aftermath, and slow recovery. Even a successful snake kill doesn't end the danger. In fact, it often marks the beginning of a different kind of survival challenge that can be just as deadly as the original encounter. Despite your thick skin and the precision of your killing bite, you haven't escaped this cobra encounter completely unscathed. A few drops of venom, perhaps from a glancing contact during the final struggle, have entered your system through micro-wounds around your mouth and pores, and now your body must fight a toxic battle on a cellular level. The first symptoms appear within minutes of the encounter's end, starting as a subtle but unmistakable change in your saliva production. Your mouth begins to produce excessive amounts of thin, watery saliva that seems to flow continuously regardless of your swallowing efforts. This hypersalivation is your nervous system's response to trace amounts of neurotoxic venom beginning to interfere with normal nerve signal transmission. Your reflexes, normally lightning fast and precisely coordinated, begin to show subtle signs of impairment that would be barely noticeable to a casual observer, but represent significant danger in your survival-focused existence. Simple movements that should be automatic, stepping over obstacles, adjusting your balance on uneven terrain, coordinating the complex muscle sequences required for digging, now require conscious effort and concentration. The mild ataxia, or loss of muscular coordination, manifests first in your rear legs, where the fine motor control needed for precise paw placement begins to deteriorate. You find yourself occasionally stumbling over irregularities in the terrain that you would normally navigate without conscious thought. Your gait becomes slightly wider and less efficient as your nervous system compensates for the reduced precision in muscle control. Finding adequate shade and shelter becomes an urgent priority, not just for protection from the sun, but because your body needs to dedicate maximum resources to metabolizing and eliminating the venom toxins. The detoxification process is energy-intensive work that your liver and kidneys must perform, while your system is already stressed from the physical demands of the snake encounter and the ongoing challenges of survival in a harsh environment. Your vulnerability during this recovery period creates a dangerous window of opportunity for other predators. The same thick skin and aggressive reputation that normally deter casual attacks become less effective when your reflexes are slowed and your coordination is impaired. Scavengers and opportunistic predators can sense weakness, and your current condition broadcasts vulnerability in ways that could attract unwanted attention. The metabolic workload of processing cobra venom compounds your existing hydration and nutrition problems in ways that create dangerous feedback loops. Your kidneys work overtime to filter toxins from your bloodstream, concentrating your urine to dangerous levels and accelerating the dehydration that was already threatening your survival. Your liver diverts energy from normal metabolic processes to focus on venom breakdown, reducing the efficiency with which your body can extract nutrients from food. Temperature regulation becomes increasingly difficult as the venom affects your nervous system's ability to coordinate the complex physiological responses needed for thermoregulation. The same sun that was already pushing your survival limits now poses even greater dangers because your body's cooling mechanisms aren't operating at full efficiency. Panting becomes less coordinated. Blood vessel dilation patterns become irregular, and your ability to seek and maintain optimal positioning for heat dissipation is compromised. The snake meat that represents your hard-won prize creates its own set of complications during the recovery period. The massive protein content that makes cobra flesh so valuable nutritionally also generates significant heat during the digestion process, adding to your thermal regulation challenges. Your digestive system must work harder to break down the tough muscle tissue, diverting blood flow and energy from other crucial processes, including venom detoxification. Sleep becomes nearly impossible during the acute phase of venom effects. The neurological disruption creates a state of restless alertness where your body craves rest, but your nervous system can't achieve the coordinated shutdown necessary for truly restorative sleep. You drift in and out of fitful unconsciousness, never fully resting, always partially alert to the various discomforts and dysfunctions that the venom has introduced to your system. Your sensory systems show subtle but significant impairment that affects your ability to detect and respond to threats. Visual tracking becomes less smooth. Auditory processing shows slight delays, and your normally acute sense of smell seems dulled and less precise. These sensory deficits compound the coordination problems, creating a cumulative effect that significantly reduces your survival capabilities during the recovery period. The psychological effects of venom exposure add another layer of challenge to an already difficult situation. The knowledge that your body isn't functioning normally creates a low-level anxiety that prevents true relaxation, even when physical rest is possible. Your normally sharp decision-making processes become clouded by the neurological effects, making you second-guess instincts and survival strategies that would normally be automatic. Recovery from even minor envenomation is a gradual process that can take days or even weeks to complete fully. The immediate life-threatening symptoms may resolve within hours, but the subtle coordination problems, sensory deficits, and metabolic disruptions can persist long after the acute danger has passed. During this extended recovery period, you remain more vulnerable to injury, less efficient at hunting, and generally less capable of dealing with the everyday challenges that define honey badger existence. The cruel irony is that the very success that netted you this valuable protein source has also compromised your ability to hunt effectively for additional food during the recovery period. The calories from the cobra meat will sustain you through the worst of the venom effects, but once those reserves are exhausted, you'll need to resume hunting while still operating at diminished capacity, scavenging lion leftovers with hyenas nearby. The rich, unmistakable scent of decomposing flesh carries on the morning breeze like a siren song of opportunity and danger intertwined. Somewhere within a few hundred meters, a large carcass lies abandoned or temporarily unguarded, representing more protein and fat than you might obtain through weeks of conventional hunting. But in the ecosystem of African scavengers, nothing valuable is ever truly unguarded, and the same scent that draws you toward potential salvation is simultaneously attracting some of the continent's most dangerous and aggressive carnivores. Your approach to the carcass site requires the tactical sophistication of a military reconnaissance mission, combined with the risk assessment skills of a bomb disposal expert. Every step closer to the potential food source increases both the caloric reward and the probability of violent death. The scent trail tells you this is likely lion kill, abandoned either because the pride has eaten their fill or because they've been driven off by competing predators. The visual reconnaissance phase begins long before you can actually see the carcass itself. You scan the surrounding terrain for the telltale signs of predator activity: scattered bones from previous feeding sessions, trampled vegetation indicating regular traffic patterns, and most importantly, the movement signatures of other scavengers who may have already discovered this opportunity. Hyena tracks in the soft sand near the carcass site immediately escalate the danger level from serious to potentially lethal. These aren't just any scavengers. Spotted hyenas are pack hunters with bone-crushing jaws capable of generating over 100 pounds per square inch of bite force. They can crack open femur bones that would resist sledgehammer blows, and they have absolutely no hesitation about adding honey badger to their diet if the opportunity presents itself. The carcass, when you finally get close enough to assess it properly, tells the story of the African food chain in graphic detail. What remains is primarily the framework: bones, cartilage, sinew, and scraps of meat too tough or inaccessible for the previous diners to bother with. The choicest cuts, the organ meat, and most of the easily accessible muscle tissue have already been claimed by higher-ranking scavengers. But even these less desirable remains represent significant nutritional value to an animal operating on the edge of starvation. Bone marrow, if you can access it, contains concentrated fats and nutrients that could sustain you for days. Sinew and cartilage provide essential proteins and minerals that your diet often lacks. Even the act of gnawing on bones helps wear down your continuously growing teeth, preventing dental problems that could eventually prove fatal. The feeding strategy requires constant vigilance and rapid escape planning. You position yourself to maintain sight lines on all potential approach routes, while keeping your primary escape path clear and unobstructed. Every few seconds of feeding must be interrupted by security checks, listening for the sound of approaching paws, scanning for movement in the surrounding vegetation, and monitoring changes in the local wildlife behavior that might signal incoming threats. The sound signature of approaching hyenas is unmistakable once you learn to recognize it. The pad of large paws moving with purpose across varied terrain, the occasional low vocalization used for pack coordination, and most ominously, the sudden silence that often precedes a coordinated hunting approach. These acoustic warnings provide your only reliable early detection system for threats that could materialize with devastating speed. Your extraction plan must account for the fact that hyenas are significantly faster than you in straight-line running, more agile in rough terrain, and capable of coordination strategies that can cut off escape routes. Your only advantages are your smaller size, which allows you to squeeze through gaps that would stop larger predators, and your intimate knowledge of local terrain features that could provide defensive positions or concealment opportunities. The actual feeding process becomes a frantic race to extract maximum nutritional value in minimum time. Your powerful jaws and specialized teeth allow you to access food sources that many other scavengers can't utilize effectively, but this advantage only matters if you can feed long enough to make the dangerous approach worthwhile. Every second spent gnawing on bones or extracting marrow is a second of vulnerability to predator attack. The bone-crushing work required to access marrow and other valuable nutrients is exhausting labor that adds to your caloric expenditure, even as you're trying to increase your energy reserves. Your jaw muscles burn with the sustained effort. Your teeth ache from the pressure and impact, and your neck muscles strain to generate the leverage needed to crack through heavy bone material. The approaching sounds of hyena activity create a terrifying deadline effect that transforms feeding from a methodical process into a desperate scramble for maximum caloric gain. You can hear them getting closer. The rustle of movement through grass, the increase in vocal communication, the unmistakable confidence of pack predators approaching a known food source. Your decision to maintain position versus retreating becomes a split-second calculation of risk versus reward, with potentially fatal consequences either way. Leave too early, and you've wasted the dangerous approach for minimal nutritional gain. Stay too long, and you risk being caught in the open by predators who view you as prey rather than competition. The margin for error in this decision-making process is essentially zero. The final moments before hyena arrival require executing your escape plan with perfect timing and coordination. You grab one last mouthful of whatever nutritious material you can carry, identify your predetermined escape route, and prepare for what could be a life or death sprint to safety. The success or failure of this scavenging mission will be determined in the next few seconds of desperate flight through terrain that offers limited cover and numerous opportunities for ambush. Your thick skin provides some protection against glancing bites during escape attempts, but direct contact with hyena jaws would likely prove fatal regardless of your species' legendary toughness. The loose skin that serves you well against smaller predators becomes irrelevant when facing bone-crushing bite forces that can crack open the heaviest bones on the African continent. Beehive raid, stings, smoke, pain. The faint sweetness carried on the afternoon breeze isn't just pleasant. It's a chemical signal that triggers every survival instinct you possess. Because that delicate honey scent represents one of nature's most heavily defended treasure troves. Somewhere within striking distance, a wild bee colony has established itself in a cavity that could contain enough concentrated carbohydrates and protein-rich larvae to sustain you for weeks. But accessing this biological gold mine requires launching a full-scale assault against thousands of insects whose entire evolutionary purpose is preventing exactly what you're planning to do. Your approach to the hive location requires the stealth and planning of a military operation, because bees are anything but passive defenders. Their sentry system includes scout bees whose sole job is detecting approaching threats and coordinating defensive responses that can mobilize the entire colony within seconds. Every movement you make as you close distance on the hive is potentially being monitored, and evaluated by insects, whose chemical communication system operates faster than most electronic networks. The hive itself, when you finally locate it, presents both opportunity and a daunting tactical challenge. Wild African bee colonies don't build the neat, manageable structures of domestic apiaries. They create sprawling organic fortresses that can contain tens of thousands of individuals, all programmed to defend their queen and food stores with suicidal dedication. The cavity they've chosen, likely a hollow tree or rocky crevice, provides them with defensive advantages that you'll have to overcome through brute force and pain tolerance. Your thick skin, which serves you so well against thorns and predator attacks, provides meaningful but limited protection against bee stings. The individual stings of worker bees can penetrate your hide, and while your skin is tough enough to prevent deep penetration, the sheer volume of stings you're about to endure will overwhelm even your impressive, natural defenses. Your eyes, nose, and mouth remain particularly vulnerable to venomous attacks that could cause dangerous swelling. The initial breach of the hive's outer defenses triggers an explosion of defensive activity that transforms the air around you into a living weapon. Thousands of worker bees pour out of the colony in coordinated waves, their wings creating a sound like an approaching tornado, their collective body heat raising the local temperature, and their coordinated attack patterns designed to drive away threats many times larger than yourself. Your digging technique must balance speed with protection as you tear into the cavity housing the colony. Every second you spend excavating is a second of concentrated stinging attacks from defenders who show no concern for their individual survival. The loose soil and organic matter you're displacing creates clouds of debris that compound the chaos, making it difficult to see your targets while providing no impediment to the bee's ability to find and attack you. The stinging sensation is unlike anything most creatures ever experience, not the sharp, localized pain of a single bee sting, but a growing constellation of burning points that spreads across every exposed surface of your body. Each sting injects a small amount of venom containing compounds specifically designed to cause pain, swelling, and inflammation. When multiplied by hundreds or thousands of individual attacks, the cumulative effect becomes a form of biological torture. Your feeding strategy during the raid requires incredible focus and pain tolerance as you try to harvest maximum nutritional value while under constant attack. The honey represents concentrated energy in its purest form, sugars that can be immediately absorbed and converted to usable calories. The larvae provide high-quality protein and fat that could sustain you through lean periods. But accessing these resources requires working with your head and paws deep inside an actively defended insect fortress. The bee larvae, plump and protein-rich, represent some of the highest quality nutrition available in your environment, but harvesting them requires precise technique while enduring continuous stinging attacks. Your tongue and the inside of your mouth become primary targets for defensive stings, creating swelling that makes swallowing difficult and breathing through your mouth nearly impossible. The honey itself creates its own complications during the raid. The sticky substance adheres to your fur, paws, and face, creating additional surface area for bee stings and making it difficult to clear stinging insects away from vulnerable areas. The sweetness that makes honey so valuable nutritionally also makes it incredibly messy to consume under combat conditions, with significant quantities ending up coating your fur rather than reaching your stomach. Your retreat from the hive represents a different kind of tactical challenge, because the defensive response doesn't simply end when you stop actively digging. Agitated bees can pursue perceived threats for considerable distances, maintaining their attack intensity long after you've abandoned the immediate vicinity of their colony. Your escape route must account for the fact that you'll be traveling while partially blinded by swelling and continuously attacked by pursuing defenders. The aftermath of a beehive raid transforms you into a walking example of why this feeding strategy is simultaneously incredibly rewarding and nearly unbearably costly. Your face begins to swell almost immediately as bee venom causes inflammatory responses around your eyes and muzzle. The swelling affects your vision, making navigation more difficult and reducing your ability to detect approaching threats or hunting opportunities. The lingering disorientation from multiple bee stings creates problems that persist long after the immediate attack has ended. Your coordination is affected by the cumulative impact of numerous venom injections. Your balance becomes less reliable, and your reaction times slow measurably. These impairments leave you more vulnerable to predator attacks and less efficient at hunting activities for hours or even days after the raid. The psychological effects of enduring thousands of bee stings create a form of trauma that affects your future decision-making around similar opportunities. The memory of that level of sustained pain influences your risk assessment in ways that might cause you to avoid valuable food sources or approach them with excessive caution that reduces your success rate. Your respiratory system shows the effects of sustained exposure to bee venom and the stress of the raid itself. Breathing becomes labored as swelling in your nasal passages forces you to rely more heavily on mouth breathing, which is less efficient and more likely to result in additional stings to sensitive mouth and throat tissues. The caloric gain from a successful beehive raid can be substantial enough to justify the suffering involved, but only if you manage to consume significant quantities of honey and larvae before the defensive response becomes overwhelming. The mathematics of energy expenditure versus nutritional gain remain unforgiving. The calories burned during the raid, combined with the metabolic costs of processing bee venom and recovering from the injuries, can exceed the energy obtained from the food if the raid isn't sufficiently successful. Maggot-ridden wounds and self-care. The old laceration across your shoulder, a souvenir from a territorial dispute 3 weeks ago, has become something far more troubling than a simple healing wound. What should have been clean scar tissue by now has instead become a festering pocket of infection where flies have discovered the perfect nursery for their offspring, turning your injury into a living incubator for dozens of writhing, feeding maggots that treat your flesh as both food source and home. The transformation from clean wound to maggot colony happened gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. The initial injury, inflicted by the claws of a rival honey badger defending his territory, was deep enough to damage muscle tissue, but not immediately life-threatening. Under normal circumstances, with adequate nutrition and rest, such wounds heal cleanly within a few weeks. But normal circumstances are a luxury you've never experienced, and the combination of poor nutrition, constant activity, and environmental contamination has created perfect conditions for chronic infection. The flies that discovered your wound weren't just random opportunists. They were specialized species that have evolved specifically to exploit exactly this type of situation. These carrion flies can detect the chemical signatures of infected tissue from remarkable distances, and once they've identified a suitable site, they waste no time in depositing eggs that will hatch into larvae, perfectly adapted for feeding on damaged flesh. The maggots themselves represent a complex biological phenomenon that's simultaneously disgusting and functionally beneficial in ways that create a troubling paradox. While their presence indicates serious infection and represents a threat to your overall health, the larvae actually perform valuable wound cleaning services by consuming dead and infected tissue that might otherwise prevent proper healing. They're living surgical instruments, albeit ones that you never requested and can't fully control. Your attempts at maggot removal become exercises in contortion and frustration that would be comical if they weren't so desperately necessary for your survival. The wound's location on your shoulder places it just beyond the reach of your teeth and claws, creating a maddening situation where you can feel the larvae moving and feeding but can't effectively address the problem through direct action. The sensation of maggots feeding on your flesh is uniquely disturbing, a constant, squirming movement that serves as a perpetual reminder of your body's deteriorating condition. Unlike external parasites that can be dislodged through grooming, These larvae are embedded in the wound itself, protected by the very tissue damage that provides their food source. Each attempt to scrape them out risks further injury to already compromised tissue. Your improvised removal techniques involve using rough surfaces, thorny vegetation, and abrasive materials to try to scrape the larvae from areas you can't reach directly. But these methods are crude and often ineffective, sometimes succeeding only in driving the maggots deeper into the wound or creating additional tissue damage that compounds the original problem. The sand-packing behavior you employ represents a desperate attempt to smother the larvae and create an environment unsuitable for their continued survival. By working coarse sand and grit into the wound, you're trying to disrupt their feeding activities and make the tissue less hospitable to their development. But this technique comes with its own risks, potentially introducing additional contaminants and creating mechanical irritation that impedes healing. The infection surrounding the maggot colony creates systemic health problems that extend far beyond the localized tissue damage. Your body's immune system is working overtime to combat the bacterial infection, diverting energy and resources from other vital functions, including digestion, thermoregulation, and muscle maintenance. The chronic immune response leaves you feeling generally unwell, with reduced energy levels and decreased hunting efficiency. The wound's refusal to heal properly in your current nutritional state creates a vicious cycle where the injury impairs your hunting ability, which reduces your nutritional intake, which further impairs your body's ability to fight infection and heal tissue damage. Each component of this cycle reinforces the others, creating a downward spiral that becomes increasingly difficult to break without significant improvement in your overall condition. Your sleep quality suffers dramatically due to the constant irritation and discomfort from the infected wound. The movement of feeding larvae creates sensations that make it nearly impossible to achieve deep, restorative sleep, leaving you chronically fatigued and operating at reduced mental capacity. The sleep deprivation compounds all your other survival challenges by impairing decision-making and slowing reaction times. The risk of systemic infection spreading from the localized wound site represents a serious threat to your survival that goes beyond the immediate discomfort and tissue damage. Bacterial infections can enter the bloodstream through compromised tissue, potentially causing sepsis or organ failure that could prove fatal even if you successfully address the immediate wound problems. Your grooming routine becomes increasingly focused on the impossible task of cleaning and caring for a wound that you can't adequately reach or see. The normal scratching and licking behaviors that work well for accessible injuries prove inadequate for dealing with a problem that requires precise manipulation of areas beyond your physical capabilities. The psychological impact of carrying a maggot-infested wound adds another layer of stress to an already overwhelming survival situation. The knowledge that your body is being consumed by parasites creates a form of anxiety that affects your overall mental state, making it harder to maintain the focus and determination necessary for effective hunting and predator avoidance. The tissue damage from prolonged maggot infestation can result in permanent scarring and reduced mobility that persists long after the immediate infection is resolved. Muscle tissue that's been extensively damaged by feeding larvae may never fully regenerate, leaving you with chronic weakness or restricted range of motion that affects your hunting capabilities for the rest of your life. The gradual deterioration of your overall health condition makes it increasingly likely that minor injuries will develop into serious infections, creating a pattern where each new wound becomes a potential site for additional maggot colonization. Your body's reduced ability to maintain healthy tissue creates an environment where fly larvae can establish themselves more easily and persist longer than they would in a properly nourished animal. Den competition with warthogs. The burrow system you've been eyeing for the past several days represents everything you need in a den site. Multiple entrances for emergency escape, good drainage to prevent flooding during rare rain events, optimal depth for temperature regulation, and most importantly, a location that provides excellent sight lines for detecting approaching threats. Unfortunately, a family of warthogs has reached exactly the same conclusion about the desirability of this particular piece of underground real estate, and they've already begun the process of claiming it as their own. Warthogs might look like comical, tusked pigs to casual observers, but they represent formidable opponents in any territorial dispute. Adult males can weigh over 200 pounds, sport razor-sharp tusks capable of inflicting fatal wounds, and possess the kind of aggressive temperament that makes them willing to fight to the death over resources they consider essential for their survival. Their thick hide and powerful build make them nearly immune to the fighting techniques that work well against other honey badger-sized opponents. The current occupant, a large male warthog who's clearly established this burrow as part of his territory, has already begun the modifications that warthogs typically make to appropriated den sites. The entrance has been widened to accommodate his bulk. The tunnels have been extended and reinforced, and the surrounding area shows the trampled vegetation and scattered droppings that mark active warthog territory. Your assessment of the situation involves calculating risks and benefits that could determine not just your comfort level for the next few months, but your actual survival chances during the coming dry season. The burrow represents security, thermal regulation, and protection from predators that could mean the difference between life and death during extreme weather events. But challenging a warthog for possession involves risking serious injury or death in a fight where you would be significantly outweighed and outgunned. The warthog's defensive capabilities include weapons and tactics that present unique challenges for honey badger combat techniques. Those prominent tusks aren't just for show. They're curved, sharp-edged weapons capable of penetrating thick hide and causing massive trauma to internal organs. The warthog's fighting style involves powerful upward slashes designed to disembowel opponents, a technique that could prove instantly fatal even to an animal with your species' legendary toughness. Your thick skin and low-slung body profile provide some advantages in a confrontation with a warthog, but the size and strength differential creates tactical problems that can't be easily overcome through technique alone. Your usual strategy of getting underneath an opponent and targeting vulnerable areas becomes problematic when facing an animal whose belly is protected by thick hide and whose legs are powerful enough to crush bones. The psychological warfare phase of the territorial dispute involves a complex exchange of threat displays, vocalizations, and strategic positioning that could potentially resolve the conflict without actual combat. Your aggressive posturing, snarling vocalizations, and demonstrations of your digging capabilities are designed to convince the warthog that the cost of defending this particular burrow exceeds its value. But warthogs are notoriously stubborn and territorial, particularly when it comes to defending den sites that they've already invested time and energy in modifying. The male currently occupying your desired burrow has clearly put significant effort into adapting the space to his needs, making him less likely to abandon it in response to threats from a smaller predator. Your strategic options range from direct confrontation to a war of attrition, designed to make the warthog's continued occupation of the burrow more trouble than it's worth. The direct approach involves launching an immediate attack aimed at inflicting enough damage to drive the warthog away, but this strategy carries enormous risks of serious injury or death. The attrition approach involves persistent harassment designed to make the warthog uncomfortable enough to relocate voluntarily. The decision to escalate or withdraw from the territorial dispute must account for factors beyond just the immediate tactical situation. Your current energy reserves, the availability of alternative den sites, the approaching seasonal changes that make secure shelter increasingly important, and your overall health status all influence the risk-benefit calculation that will determine your strategy. The harassment campaign you ultimately decide to pursue involves a series of calculated provocations designed to disrupt the warthog's peace and security, without triggering an all-out battle that you might not survive. This includes territorial marking around the burrow entrance, aggressive vocalizations during the warthog's rest periods, and strategic positioning that forces the occupant to remain constantly alert for potential attacks. Your persistence in the face of warthog defensive responses requires a careful balance between maintaining pressure and avoiding escalation to lethal combat. Each interaction must be calculated to increase the warthog's stress level while minimizing your exposure to those dangerous tusks. It's a psychological campaign where the goal is to make continued occupation of the burrow more costly than relocation. The warthog's counter-strategies include defensive displays, designed to discourage your harassment efforts, and occasional aggressive charges meant to drive you away from the immediate vicinity. These charges represent serious threats that require perfect timing and terrain knowledge to avoid, because a successful warthog attack could result in injuries that would prove fatal in your current marginal condition. The eventual resolution of the territorial dispute, regardless of whether you succeed in claiming the burrow or are forced to seek alternatives, will have lasting implications for your survival prospects during the coming months. Failure to secure adequate shelter could leave you vulnerable to predators, weather extremes, and the various other threats that make surface living so dangerous for honey badgers. Your fallback options include a series of less desirable burrow sites that you've identified during your territorial surveys, but each alternative comes with its own set of compromises and disadvantages. Some are too shallow for effective temperature regulation, others lack adequate escape routes, and several are located in areas with higher predator activity that would make daily hunting more dangerous. The physical and psychological toll of the extended territorial dispute adds to your overall stress load and energy expenditure during a period when you can least afford additional challenges. The constant state of alertness required for harassment activities interferes with rest and hunting efficiency, creating another layer of survival pressure in an already overwhelming environment. Smell map of a 10-kilometer territory. Your mental map of the surrounding 10-kilometer territory isn't drawn with landmarks and GPS coordinates. It's constructed from layers of scent information that create a four-dimensional landscape of chemical signatures, temporal patterns, and biological intelligence that would make the most sophisticated surveillance network seem primitive by comparison. Every breath you take adds new information to this constantly updating database of who lives where, when they travel, what they eat, and most importantly, how dangerous they might be to encounter. The territory you've claimed and defended over the past 2 years represents more than just hunting grounds. It's a complex ecosystem of overlapping animal movements, resource distribution patterns, and seasonal changes that you've learned to read, like a biological roadmap. Each scent marker tells a story. Each trail intersection provides intelligence about competitor behavior, and each temporal pattern reveals opportunities and threats that could determine your survival chances on any given day. Your scent mapping abilities operate on multiple timescales simultaneously, allowing you to distinguish between odors that are minutes old, hours old, or days old with remarkable precision. Fresh scent trails provide real-time intelligence about immediate threats and opportunities, while older markers create historical context that helps you understand long-term patterns in animal movement and territorial usage. The layered complexity of scent information in your territory resembles a three-dimensional chemical library where each location contains multiple stories written in different molecular languages. A single tree or rock outcrop might carry the scent signatures of dozens of different species, each deposited at different times and under different circumstances, creating a complex narrative of animal activity that you can read and interpret with remarkable accuracy. Your ability to distinguish between different individual animals within the same species adds another layer of sophistication to your territorial intelligence gathering. You can identify specific lions, leopards, hyenas, and other dangerous predators by their unique scent signatures, allowing you to track their movement patterns and predict their behavior with accuracy that often means the difference between successful hunting and fatal encounters. The boundaries of your territory are more conceptual than physical, defined by the practical limits of how far you can travel for daily hunting while still returning to secure den sites before nightfall. These boundaries shift seasonally as prey availability changes, water sources dry up or become accessible, and predator pressure varies with the movement patterns of larger carnivores. Your territorial overlap with other honey badgers creates a complex diplomatic situation where boundaries are constantly negotiated through scent marking, territorial displays, and occasional direct confrontations. The scent information you gather helps you avoid unnecessary conflicts while maintaining access to the most productive hunting areas within your range. The temporal patterns embedded in your scent map reveal the daily and seasonal rhythms that govern animal behavior throughout your territory. You know which water sources are visited by specific predators at particular times of day, which game trails see the heaviest traffic during different seasons, and which areas become more or less dangerous as environmental conditions change. Your mental catalog of prey animal movement patterns allows you to predict where different food sources are most likely to be found at specific times and under particular environmental conditions. This predictive capability is crucial for efficient hunting, allowing you to concentrate your efforts in areas where success is most probable rather than wasting energy on random searches. The constant updating required to maintain accurate territorial intelligence represents a significant cognitive and physical workload that adds to your daily survival challenges. Each patrol circuit must balance the need for current information against the energy costs of comprehensive territory monitoring, creating another layer of resource management in your survival calculations. Your scent mapping system also includes sophisticated threat assessment capabilities that allow you to evaluate the relative danger levels of different areas within your territory based on predator activity patterns. Areas with heavy lion scent receive different risk ratings than locations primarily used by smaller predators, and your route planning takes these danger assessments into account. The seasonal changes in your territory require constant updates to your mental maps. As water sources disappear, vegetation patterns change, and animal movement routes shift in response to environmental pressures. What might be a safe, productive hunting area during the wet season could become a deadly trap during drought periods when predators concentrate around limited water sources. Your territorial knowledge includes detailed information about escape routes, defensive positions, and emergency shelter options that could prove crucial during unexpected encounters with predators. This escape route planning is integrated into your daily movement patterns, ensuring that you're never more than a quick sprint away from some form of protective cover. The intelligence gathered through your scent mapping activities influences every aspect of your daily survival strategy, from route selection for hunting expeditions to timing decisions that minimize exposure to dangerous predators. The accuracy and completeness of your territorial knowledge often determines whether you eat or go hungry, whether you avoid predators or encounter them, and ultimately, whether you survive another day in one of the world's harshest environments. The mental processing required to maintain and update your territorial scent map represents a cognitive workload that would be overwhelming for most species. But for honey badgers, this sophisticated environmental awareness is simply another essential survival skill that must be mastered to have any hope of long-term survival in the African wilderness. Marking and the constant remark battle. Your anal glands work overtime in a never-ending chemical warfare campaign that turns every rock, tree, and significant landmark in your territory into a battlefield of scent messages that must be constantly updated, refreshed, and defended against the marking efforts of competitors who seem determined to erase your existence from the landscape one molecule at a time. The biological mechanics of scent marking involve specialized glands that produce complex chemical cocktails containing information about your identity, health status, territorial claims, and reproductive condition. These aren't simple, "I was here" messages. They're sophisticated biological documents that other honey badgers can read, like detailed intelligence reports, extracting information about your strength, stress levels, diet, and overall fitness. Your daily marking routine requires systematic coverage of key strategic points throughout your territory, a process that demands significant energy expenditure and exposes you to danger as you visit prominent locations that are equally attractive to other territorial honey badgers. Each marking session involves the physical act of scent deposition, plus the time and attention required to evaluate existing marks left by competitors and potential threats. The freshness detection arms race between you and your rivals has reached levels of sophistication that would impress forensic scientists. You can determine not just who left a particular scent mark, but approximately when they deposited it, what their emotional state was at the time, and whether they were marking defensively or aggressively. This temporal intelligence helps you avoid direct confrontations while maintaining your territorial claims. Your ability to distinguish between marks that are minutes old versus hours old becomes crucial for avoiding dangerous encounters with rivals who might still be in the immediate vicinity. Fresh marks trigger heightened alertness and careful route planning, while older signatures provide historical intelligence about competitor movement patterns without indicating immediate threat levels. The psychological pressure of maintaining territorial boundaries through scent marking creates a constant underlying stress that never fully subsides. There's always another landmark that needs remarking, always another competitor's signature that needs to be covered, always another boundary dispute that requires chemical resolution. The territorial arms race literally never ends, continuing every day until death or permanent displacement. Your marking strategy must balance comprehensive coverage against energy conservation and predator exposure, because the most prominent and effective marking sites are often the same locations that attract dangerous predators. Elevated rocks, tree bases, and trail intersections provide excellent scent distribution, but also create predictable target zones where ambush predators might wait for territorial honey badgers. The fluid costs of constant marking add another layer to your already desperate resource management challenges. Each scent deposit requires biological fluids that your dehydrated body can barely afford to spare. Yet, failing to maintain adequate marking frequency could result in territorial losses that would be far more costly than the immediate fluid expenditure. Your rivals employ counter-marking strategies designed to neutralize your territorial claims by depositing their own scent signatures directly over your marks. This creates escalating marking battles, where the same locations become focus points for increasingly frequent remarking sessions, as each competitor tries to maintain chemical dominance over strategic territorial features. The detection of fresh competitor marks triggers immediate decision-making crises about whether to respond with countermarking, which advertises your current location and activities to potential threats, or to ignore the challenge and risk losing territorial authority over important resource areas. Neither option is entirely safe, and both carry consequences that could affect your survival prospects. Your scent reading abilities allow you to identify specific individual competitors and track their territorial expansion efforts over time. You know which rival has been systematically pushing into your eastern boundary, which female has been exploring your core hunting areas, and which aggressive male has been leaving increasingly confident marks near your primary den sites. The territorial boundaries maintained through scent marking are constantly shifting as individual competitors gain or lose condition, expand or contract their territorial claims, and respond to seasonal changes in resource availability. What represents secure territory during abundant periods can quickly become contested ground when environmental pressures increase competition for limited resources. Your emotional state affects both your marking behavior and your interpretation of competitor signatures, creating feedback loops where territorial stress influences marking patterns, which in turn affects how other honey badgers perceive your territorial strength and confidence. Stressed marking can actually advertise vulnerability to opportunistic competitors, The time investment required for adequate territorial maintenance through scent marking represents hours each day that cannot be devoted to hunting, rest, or other survival activities. This creates another layer of the cruel mathematics that governs honey badger existence, where essential territorial defense activities compete with equally essential survival needs for your limited time and energy. Your marking routine must be adapted to seasonal changes in scent persistence and distribution patterns. During dry periods, scent marks fade more quickly and require more frequent refreshing, while wet seasons can wash away marks entirely or create scent pooling that confuses territorial messages and boundary definitions. The vulnerability created by predictable marking routines forces you to vary your territorial patrol patterns and timing to avoid giving competitors or predators reliable information about your movement schedules. But this strategic unpredictability must be balanced against the need for systematic territorial coverage that maintains effective boundary defense. Your ability to read the territorial history of an area through layered scent analysis allows you to understand long-term patterns of honey badger activity, territorial changes, and population dynamics that influence your own territorial strategies. Areas with heavy historical marking activity might indicate high-quality resources, but also suggest increased competition and conflict probability. Long trek for a dry water pan. The decision to abandon your established territory and embark on a dangerous 15-kilometer journey to the nearest known water source isn't made lightly. It's the desperate calculation of an animal whose body has reached the critical threshold where dehydration poses a more immediate threat to survival than the predators, competitors, and unknowns that await along the route to potentially life-saving moisture. Your internal GPS system, calibrated through years of territorial exploration and survival necessity, points you toward a seasonal pan that held water as recently as 2 months ago. But the harsh reality of Kalahari hydrology means that water sources which seem permanent can disappear overnight, leaving nothing but cracked clay and the scattered bones of animals who made similar desperate journeys only to find empty basins where life-giving water once pooled. The route ahead takes you through territories belonging to other honey badgers, across hunting grounds claimed by various predator species, and over terrain that offers limited cover and numerous opportunities for fatal encounters. Every kilometer of this journey represents a gamble where the energy expenditure of travel must be weighed against rapidly diminishing energy reserves and the possibility that you're walking toward empty water holes. Your paws, already cracked and worn from constant digging and rough terrain navigation, begin to show serious signs of distress within the first few kilometers of forced march, across increasingly abrasive sand and scattered rocks. Each step sends small jolts of pain through feet that were never designed for long-distance travel, creating a feedback loop where the journey becomes more painful and less efficient with every passing hour. The heat shimmer that rises from the superheated landscape creates optical illusions that would be merely annoying under normal circumstances, but become genuinely dangerous when you're operating with the compromised judgment that accompanies severe dehydration. Distances become impossible to judge accurately, potential threats shimmer in and out of visibility, and the very landscape seems to shift and waver in ways that make navigation increasingly difficult. Your mental map of alternative water sources grows smaller and more desperate as you catalogue the seasonal pools, temporary seepages, and marginal moisture sources that have systematically dried up during this extended drought period. Each potential stop along your route represents hope that diminishes as you approach and discover nothing but sun-baked earth where water once offered salvation. The physical mechanics of long-distance travel on foot become increasingly problematic as dehydration affects your coordination, balance, and muscle function. What should be automatic movements, like stepping over obstacles or maintaining steady pace, require conscious effort and concentration that drain additional mental resources from an already overtaxed system. Your vulnerability during this forced march increases exponentially with every kilometer traveled away from familiar territory and known escape routes. The defensive advantages that come from intimate terrain knowledge disappear as you move through areas where you can't predict predator behavior, don't know the location of emergency shelter, and haven't mapped the tactical features that could mean survival during unexpected encounters. The scent trails that cross your path tell stories of other desperate animals who have made similar journeys with varying degrees of success. Some tracks lead toward the water source you're seeking, while others veer off in different directions or simply disappear, leaving you to wonder whether their makers found salvation or became meals for predators who patrol these migration routes. Your energy reserves, already dangerously low before beginning this journey, continue to dwindle with each hour of travel, while offering no opportunity for replenishment through hunting or foraging. The mathematics of caloric expenditure versus potential gain become increasingly unforgiving as you commit more deeply to a journey that might end in death, even if you successfully reach your destination. The psychological effects of traveling through unfamiliar territory while severely dehydrated create a form of sensory distortion that makes threat assessment increasingly unreliable. Sounds seem to come from wrong directions. Scents become difficult to interpret accurately, and visual processing shows delays that could prove fatal during predator encounters. Your backup plans for this journey are limited and increasingly desperate as the distance from safe territory increases. Turning back becomes less viable with each kilometer traveled, while continuing forward commits you to completing a journey that might exceed your physical capabilities. The point of no return approaches with terrifying inevitability. The game trails that you follow toward the distant water source also serve as highways for predators who understand the desperate hydration needs that drive prey animals toward predictable destinations. These routes become killing fields during drought periods, as carnivores position themselves along the approaches to water sources and wait for dehydration-weakened animals to stumble into range. Your footpad injuries from the rough terrain begin to affect your gait and travel speed, creating a cascading series of problems where reduced mobility increases your vulnerability to predator attacks while extending the duration of dangerous exposure. Each step becomes a conscious decision to continue despite increasing pain and decreasing efficiency. The horizon that should eventually reveal your destination remains frustratingly empty of the visual cues that would indicate the presence of water or vegetation that suggests moisture availability. The landscape maintains its harsh uniformity, offering no encouragement and no evidence that your desperate gamble will result in anything other than exhaustion and death in unfamiliar territory. Your strategic position deteriorates rapidly as the journey extends beyond your initial time estimates and energy calculations. Every hour of delay increases the probability that you'll be caught in open terrain during peak predator activity periods, while your diminishing strength reduces your ability to defend yourself or execute emergency escape maneuvers if threats materialize. The cruel irony of this water-seeking journey is that success is measured not just by reaching the destination, but by finding actual water when you arrive, having sufficient energy reserves to return safely to familiar territory, and surviving the entire round trip without falling victim to the numerous threats that make such desperate expeditions necessary in the first place. Hunger drives riskier choices at midday. The gnawing emptiness in your stomach has progressed beyond mere discomfort into a biological imperative that's beginning to override the careful risk assessment and tactical thinking that normally keep you alive. As the sun reaches its punishing zenith and common sense dictates seeking shade and conserving energy, your body's starvation response is pushing you toward increasingly desperate hunting decisions that ignore environmental dangers and predator activity patterns. Your cognitive function shows clear signs of impairment as blood sugar levels drop to critically low ranges, creating a form of biological tunnel vision where immediate caloric needs eclipse long-term survival strategy. The careful cost-benefit analysis that typically governs your hunting choices becomes clouded by metabolic desperation, leading you to consider prey targets and hunting opportunities that you would normally dismiss as too dangerous or energy inefficient. The midday heat, which should serve as a natural limit on physical activity, instead becomes another layer of stress that compounds your decision-making difficulties. Your judgment, already compromised by hunger, becomes further impaired by the cognitive effects of heat stress, creating a dangerous combination where poor choices seem increasingly reasonable despite their obvious risks. Your pursuit of a ground squirrel that would normally be considered too fast and agile for successful capture becomes an obsessive chase that burns precious calories while offering minimal probability of success. The squirrel's superior speed and intimate knowledge of local escape routes should make this an obviously futile effort. But your hunger-driven desperation transforms a poor tactical decision into an irresistible compulsion. The energy expenditure of these increasingly frantic hunting attempts creates a vicious cycle where failed hunts drain your reserves faster than successful ones can replenish them. Each burst of high-intensity activity designed to capture elusive prey pushes you further into caloric deficit, making subsequent hunting efforts even more desperate and less likely to succeed. Your normal prey selection criteria, carefully calibrated to balance energy expenditure against probable caloric gain, begin to break down under the pressure of starvation-induced desperation. Prey animals that would typically be ignored as too small, too fast, or too dangerous suddenly seem like viable targets worthy of sustained pursuit efforts that would be obviously wasteful under normal circumstances. The heat stroke symptoms that begin to manifest during your midday hunting frenzy should serve as clear warnings to seek immediate shelter and rest. But your hunger-compromised judgment interprets these physiological distress signals as acceptable costs that must be endured in pursuit of desperately needed calories. Your body temperature climbs toward dangerous levels while your decision-making capacity continues to deteriorate. Your breathing becomes rapid and shallow as your cardiovascular system struggles to maintain function under the combined stress of extreme heat, physical exertion, and severe dehydration. The oxygen debt created by sustained high-intensity activity in crushing heat begins to affect your muscle coordination and reaction times, making successful prey capture even less likely while increasing your vulnerability to environmental hazards. The tunnel vision that accompanies severe hunger extends beyond prey selection into predator awareness, causing you to ignore or minimize threats that would normally trigger immediate defensive responses. Your fixation on potential food sources creates dangerous blind spots in your threat assessment, leaving you vulnerable to ambush predators who might exploit your distracted, desperate condition. Your normal territorial boundaries and safety protocols become increasingly irrelevant as hunger drives you into areas and situations that would typically be avoided due to high predator activity or unfamiliar terrain. The desperate search for any available food source overrides the territorial intelligence and risk management strategies that normally guide your movement patterns. The physiological stress of extended hunting activity in extreme heat begins to manifest in ways that could prove immediately life-threatening. Your core body temperature approaches levels that can cause organ damage, while your hydration status deteriorates rapidly through excessive panting and heat-stress perspiration that your body can't afford to lose. Your muscle coordination shows clear signs of deterioration as heat exhaustion progresses, making the precise movements required for successful prey capture increasingly difficult to execute. The same desperate energy that drives you to continue hunting also impairs your ability to hunt effectively, creating a frustrating paradox where increased effort yields decreased results. The near heat stroke episode that finally forces you to abandon your midday hunting attempts represents a crisis point where immediate survival requirements temporarily override hunger-driven desperation. Your body's emergency cooling systems have reached their operational limits, and continuing to hunt could result in heat-related death within minutes rather than hours. Your forced retreat to whatever inadequate shade you can find becomes a bitter acknowledgement that the hunger driving your risky behavior remains unresolved, while your physical condition has been further compromised by the failed hunting attempts. The calories burned during the futile midday hunt represent energy that cannot be recovered, deepening your nutritional deficit and making future hunting efforts even more challenging. The psychological impact of hunger-driven poor decision-making creates a form of survival anxiety that compounds the stress of your already precarious situation. The knowledge that starvation is affecting your judgment in ways that could prove fatal adds another layer of worry to an already overwhelming array of survival challenges. Your recovery time from the heat exhaustion episode extends the period during which you cannot hunt effectively, creating additional delays in addressing the hunger that drove the risky behavior in the first place. The time lost to heat stress recovery represents hunting opportunities that cannot be reclaimed, further exacerbating the caloric deficit that precipitated the crisis. The lesson embedded in this near disaster highlights the cruel paradox of starvation survival, where the desperate need for calories can drive behaviors that actually reduce the probability of obtaining food, while increasing the risk of death from causes other than hunger itself. Porcupine quill accident. What should have been a routine investigation of a promising burrow entrance transforms into a nightmare of penetrating pain and dangerous complications when your questing nose encounters not the expected rodent occupant, but rather the business end of a Cape porcupine whose defensive arsenal has just turned your face into a pincushion of embedded quills that will torture you for days and potentially threaten your ability to hunt effectively. The porcupine's defensive system is a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering specifically designed to discourage exactly the kind of predatory investigation you were conducting. Those quills aren't simple spines, they're barbed projectiles, equipped with microscopic hooks that make removal incredibly difficult and painful, while maximizing the deterrent effect on would-be predators who might consider a repeat performance. Your initial reaction to the quill penetration is an explosive combination of pain, surprise, and frustrated rage that does absolutely nothing to improve your tactical situation. The natural impulse to shake your head violently in response to the sudden agony actually drives some quills deeper into your facial tissue while causing others to break off at skin level, leaving buried quill fragments that will continue to cause problems long after the visible portions are removed. The location of the quill impacts creates a particularly problematic situation for a predator whose survival depends on precise use of facial sensory organs and jaw mechanics. Quills embedded around your nose interfere with your primary scent detection system, while those near your mouth make normal feeding behaviors painful and potentially impossible until they can be successfully extracted. Your attempts at quill removal become an exercise in contortion and frustration that highlights the limitations of honey badger anatomy when it comes to precision medical procedures. Your claws, perfect for digging and fighting, lack the delicate manipulation capabilities needed for careful quill extraction, while your teeth, powerful enough to crush bones, prove too crude for the surgical precision required to remove barbed quills without causing additional tissue damage. The barbed design of porcupine quills makes removal a delicate process where pulling too hard or at the wrong angle risks breaking the quill shaft and leaving the barb tip embedded deep in tissue where it becomes virtually impossible to extract. Each removal attempt becomes a calculated risk where success means relief and failure means making the problem significantly worse. Your self-extraction technique involves gripping visible quill shafts with your front teeth and pulling with steady, controlled pressure while trying to maintain the proper angle to avoid quill breakage. But the pain from quill movement during extraction attempts makes it nearly impossible to maintain the steady, controlled approach that successful removal requires. The quills that penetrate deeply enough to reach nerve clusters create levels of pain that would incapacitate most animals, but honey badgers can't afford the luxury of incapacitation when injury occurs in hostile territory. You must continue functioning despite agony that affects every facial expression, every attempt to eat, and every effort to use your nose for the scent-based navigation that your survival depends upon. Your feeding difficulties begin immediately and promise to persist for days or weeks depending on your success rate with quill removal. Each attempt to open your mouth wide enough for normal feeding triggers movement in embedded quills, creating sharp stabbing pains that make eating a torturous ordeal even when food is available. The infection risk posed by multiple puncture wounds in facial tissue creates another layer of medical complications that your body must address while already operating under severe nutritional and hydration stress. Porcupine quills aren't sterile instruments. They carry bacteria and environmental contaminants that can cause serious infections in the puncture wounds they create. Your vision becomes partially impaired by swelling around quill penetration sites near your eyes, creating functional blindness that makes hunting more difficult and predator detection less reliable. The combination of visual impairment, scent detection problems, and feeding difficulties creates a cascading series of survival challenges that compound each other in dangerous ways. The psychological impact of facing weeks of chronic pain and functional impairment adds another layer of stress to your already overwhelming survival situation. The knowledge that simple activities like eating, drinking, and breathing will be painful, reminders of your porcupine encounter, affects your mental state in ways that could influence future decision-making and risk assessment. Your grooming behavior becomes obsessively focused on the impossible task of removing quills that are embedded beyond the reach of your claws and teeth. The constant attempts at self-treatment waste energy and time, while often making the quill situation worse through unsuccessful extraction attempts that drive barbs deeper or break quill shafts. The caloric deficit that was already threatening your survival before the porcupine encounter becomes even more critical as feeding difficulties reduce your ability to consume available food efficiently. Each meal becomes a battle against pain and mechanical difficulties that may result in significant food waste and inadequate nutritional intake. Your territorial patrol activities must be modified to account for reduced sensory capabilities and increased vulnerability that result from the quill injuries. Areas that were previously safe to traverse may become dangerous when your ability to detect approaching threats is compromised by facial injuries and sensory impairment. The quill removal process extends over days or weeks, as your body slowly works some quills toward the surface through natural healing processes, while others remain embedded as permanent reminders of the encounter. The gradual nature of quill elimination means that pain and functional impairment persist long after the initial injury, creating chronic problems that affect every aspect of your daily survival routine. Your future approach to burrow investigation must be modified to account for the possibility of similar defensive encounters. But the need for thorough prey investigation conflicts with the desire to avoid repeat porcupine incidents. The balance between caution and thoroughness becomes another layer of tactical complexity in your already challenging hunting strategy. Digging mania. Instant burrow engineering. When the temperature soars past survival thresholds and the nearest shade is kilometers away, your body's emergency response system triggers what can only be described as digging mania, a frantic, almost possessed excavation sequence where your survival depends entirely on creating underground shelter, faster than the African sun can cook your organs into biological failure. Your rapid excavation technique represents millions of years of evolutionary refinement focused on one crucial skill: the ability to disappear underground in minutes rather than hours when environmental conditions threaten immediate death. Your claws work like organic earth-moving equipment, each stroke precisely calculated to remove maximum soil volume while maintaining structural integrity in the expanding tunnel system. The spiral clearing method you employ creates a funnel-shaped entrance that gradually transitions into horizontal tunnels, allowing you to work efficiently while maintaining access to fresh air during the excavation process. This technique prevents the tunnel collapse that would result from straight vertical digging, while providing the depth needed for effective temperature regulation during extreme heat events. Your ventilation planning becomes crucial as the tunnel extends beyond surface air circulation range, requiring strategic placement of secondary shafts and careful attention to airflow patterns that will keep the burrow livable, rather than turning it into an underground death trap. Poor ventilation design could result in carbon dioxide accumulation or oxygen depletion that would make your emergency shelter more dangerous than the surface conditions you're trying to escape. The soil composition you encounter determines both the difficulty of excavation and the structural stability of your emergency burrow. Loose sand offers easy digging but poor tunnel integrity, while clay provides excellent structural properties but requires enormous energy expenditure to excavate. Your technique must adapt instantly to changing soil conditions as you dig deeper and encounter different geological layers. Your claw wear accelerates dramatically during high-intensity excavation sessions, with the repeated impact against rocks, roots, and compacted soil, creating microfractures and chips that accumulate faster than your body can repair them. Each emergency digging session represents a significant investment in claw maintenance debt that will affect your digging efficiency for weeks or months afterward. The physical demands of rapid tunnel excavation push your cardiovascular system to its absolute limits, requiring sustained high-intensity muscle work while your body is already stressed by heat, dehydration, and the various other survival challenges that precipitated this emergency. Your heart rate climbs to levels that would be unsustainable for most mammals, while your breathing becomes rapid and shallow as oxygen demands exceed your respiratory system's capacity. Your excavation debris management becomes a critical engineering challenge, as the volume of displaced soil threatens to block your tunnel entrance or create unstable spoil piles that could collapse back into your working area. The sand and dirt you're removing must be distributed efficiently to maintain access and structural integrity, while you continue digging deeper into cooler earth layers. The tunnel collapse risks increase exponentially as your emergency burrow extends beyond the depth where soil cohesion can support the excavated space without additional structural reinforcement. Your digging technique must balance speed against safety, because a tunnel collapse during construction could trap you underground in a situation where rescue is impossible and death is inevitable. Your energy calculation during emergency excavation involves burning calories at rates that your already depleted reserves can barely sustain, but stopping the digging process could result in immediate heat death rather than the delayed starvation that continued excavation might cause. It's another brutal example of the impossible choices that define honey badger survival mathematics. The hard pan layers that you occasionally encounter represent impenetrable obstacles that can stop your excavation progress entirely, forcing you to either redirect your tunnel at angles that might compromise structural integrity, or abandon the burrow site entirely and search for more suitable digging locations while your heat tolerance window continues to shrink. Your instinctive understanding of soil mechanics allows you to assess excavation sites quickly and accurately, identifying locations where subsurface conditions will support rapid tunnel construction versus areas where hidden obstacles, rock layers, or unstable soil compositions would make emergency digging impossible or dangerous. The cooling effect of reaching earth layers that haven't been heated by direct sunlight provides immediate relief that can mean the difference between heat stroke and survival. But achieving this thermal sanctuary requires sustained digging effort that continues long after your muscles begin to cramp and your coordination starts to deteriorate from heat stress. Your burrow engineering must account for multiple entrance and exit points that provide escape routes if the primary tunnel becomes compromised, or if predators discover your emergency shelter. Single exit burrows become death traps if the entrance is blocked. But creating multiple exits requires additional excavation time when every minute of surface exposure increases heat stroke risk. The structural reinforcement techniques you employ involve strategic placement of roots, rocks, and other natural materials that can strengthen tunnel walls and prevent catastrophic collapse during the cooling and settling process that occurs as excavated earth adjusts to its new configuration. Your underground navigation skills become crucial as emergency burrows extend beyond visual range of the entrance, requiring you to maintain accurate spatial orientation while working in complete darkness. Getting lost in your own tunnel system during emergency excavation could result in death by entrapment, even if the original heat threat is successfully avoided. The completion of emergency excavation doesn't end the engineering challenges. Your new burrow must provide adequate temperature, regulation, ventilation, and humidity control to sustain life during extended occupation periods. Poor environmental controls could make your underground shelter uninhabitable, even though it provides protection from surface hazards, earthworms, lizards, anything edible. Your hunting strategy has devolved from the calculated pursuit of substantial prey into a desperate scavenging operation where calories come in minuscule packages that barely justify the energy expenditure required to capture them. But when you're operating on the razor's edge between survival and starvation, even a single earthworm represents precious protein that could buy you another few hours of continued existence. The transition to micro-prey hunting represents a fundamental shift in your behavioral patterns and survival calculations, where success is measured not in satisfying meals, but in the accumulation of countless tiny nutritional gains that might collectively provide enough sustenance to keep your basic metabolic processes functioning until larger prey opportunities present themselves. Your foraging microhabitats require intimate knowledge of the small-scale environments where invertebrates and tiny vertebrates concentrate during different weather conditions and times of day. Under stones that retain morning moisture, you might find slugs and beetles. In root tangles where organic matter accumulates, earthworms and grubs create small but accessible protein sources. The energy mathematics of microprey hunting operate on margins so thin that they would be laughable if they weren't literally matters of life and death. A single earthworm might provide 3 or 4 calories of usable energy, while the digging, searching, and capture process required to obtain it burns 5 or 6 calories. You're running a biological deficit with every successful hunt, slowly consuming your own body to stay alive. Your sensory systems must be recalibrated for detecting prey items that measure in millimeters rather than centimeters, requiring heightened sensitivity to the minute vibrations, chemical traces, and visual cues that indicate the presence of invertebrate prey in their microscopic hiding places. The same senses that once tracked large mammals must now focus on detecting earthworm movement beneath leaf litter. The capture techniques required for microprey present unique challenges that test the limits of your physical capabilities and tool design. Your claws, evolved for digging through hard earth and combat with large predators, lack the precision needed for delicate invertebrate capture. Your teeth, designed for crushing bones and tearing meat, prove almost comically oversized for processing earthworms and insect larvae. Your search patterns become increasingly systematic and obsessive as you work methodically through every possible microhabitat within your immediate area, turning over stones, investigating root systems, probing soft earth for hidden invertebrates, and examining every crevice and depression that might harbor edible organisms. The psychological adaptation to microprey hunting requires accepting that satisfaction and satiation are no longer realistic goals. Instead, You're simply trying to slow the rate of your body's consumption of its own muscle and fat reserves. It's a holding action against starvation rather than a solution to hunger, buying time rather than providing genuine nourishment. Your competition for microprey includes numerous species that are specifically adapted for small-scale foraging and are much more efficient at locating and capturing invertebrate prey than a honey badger could ever be. Shrews, small birds, specialized reptiles, and various arthropods compete for the same limited resources using hunting techniques evolved specifically for microprey exploitation. The diminishing returns of microprey hunting become apparent as you exhaust the easily accessible invertebrates in your immediate area and are forced to expand your search radius or dig deeper into increasingly marginal habitats, where prey density is lower and capture difficulty is higher. Each successful microhunt makes subsequent hunting more challenging and less rewarding. Your digestive system, designed to process substantial meals of meat and fat, operates inefficiently when presented with tiny quantities of low-energy prey items that barely justify the metabolic costs of digestion. The enzymatic and mechanical processes required to break down food consume energy that may exceed the nutritional value of the prey being processed. The time investment required for effective microprey hunting represents hours that cannot be devoted to seeking larger prey opportunities, creating opportunity costs that compound the inefficiency of this survival strategy. While you're spending hours hunting earthworms, potential rodent or reptile prey might be passing through your territory, undetected and uncaptured. Your territorial knowledge must be expanded to include detailed maps of microhabitats and invertebrate population concentrations that weren't relevant when you could sustain yourself on larger prey. Seasonal patterns of invertebrate activity, soil moisture conditions that affect earthworm distribution, and the small-scale environmental factors that influence insect behavior all become crucial survival intelligence. The physical toll of constant micro-foraging involves repetitive strain injuries and fatigue patterns that differ significantly from the explosive energy demands of large prey hunting. Your neck muscles ache from constantly looking down at ground level. Your paws become tender from repetitive digging motions, and your eyes strain from focusing on tiny objects for extended periods. Your prey processing techniques must be adapted for organisms that provide minimal nutrition per unit and require different handling approaches than larger prey items. Earthworms can be consumed quickly and completely, but they offer so little substance that you need dozens of them to equal the nutritional value of a single small rodent. The frustration tolerance required for micro-prey hunting tests your psychological endurance as much as your physical capabilities, because the work is tedious, the rewards are minimal, and the constant awareness that you're slowly starving, despite successful hunting, creates a form of existential stress that compounds all your other survival challenges. Human fence and road hazards. The barbed wire fence that cuts across what was once continuous hunting territory represents more than just a physical barrier. It's a deadly obstacle course that fragments your world into disconnected patches while creating new categories of injury and death that your evolutionary programming never prepared you to handle. Your initial encounter with the fence occurs during a routine territorial patrol when the metal barrier suddenly appears in your path, like a geometric anomaly that makes no biological sense. The wire strands are positioned at heights that seem specifically designed to catch honey badgers. Too high to crawl under easily, too low to walk under comfortably, and armed with sharp metal barbs that turn any contact into a potentially serious injury. The barbed wire design represents human engineering optimized for livestock control rather than wildlife passage, creating penetration points that snag fur, puncture skin, and cause lacerations that become infected in ways that could prove fatal without proper medical attention. Each barb is positioned to maximize holding power against large domestic animals, but they work equally well at trapping and injuring smaller wildlife. Your attempt to navigate through the fence requires careful analysis of spacing patterns and strategic route selection. But even the most cautious approach results in multiple snout scratches and minor punctures as the barbs find their targets despite your efforts to avoid contact. The loose skin that protects you against predator attacks becomes a liability around barbed wire, providing additional surface area for hooks and snags. The territorial fragmentation caused by fence construction forces you to develop new movement patterns and hunting strategies that account for barriers that can't be eliminated or avoided. Prime hunting areas that were once accessible become isolated territories that require dangerous fence-crossing expeditions to reach, while traditional travel routes are blocked or made hazardous by wire obstacles. Your road crossing attempts introduce an entirely new category of predator threat, in the form of vehicles that move faster than any biological predator and show no awareness of or concern for wildlife presence on their hunting grounds. The machines follow predictable routes, but travel at speeds that make collision avoidance extremely difficult, even when you detect their approach in time to react. The headlight disorientation that occurs during nighttime road crossings creates temporary blindness that leaves you vulnerable to collision even when you've successfully detected approaching vehicles. The bright lights overwhelm your night-adapted vision, creating moments of functional blindness during which you can't navigate effectively or assess the vehicle's position and speed. Your vehicle mortality risk assessment must account for the fact that automobiles represent predators against which your natural defenses are completely ineffective. Your thick skin, aggressive temperament, and fighting ability provide no protection against mechanical impact forces that can cause instant death regardless of your species' legendary toughness. The road surface itself presents navigation challenges that differ significantly from natural terrain, with smooth pavement offering poor traction for rapid acceleration or sudden direction changes that might be necessary to avoid approaching vehicles. Your claws, perfectly adapted for natural substrate navigation, prove less effective on artificial surfaces designed for wheeled vehicle traffic. Your timing calculations for safe road crossing require accurate assessment of vehicle approach speeds and distances, but your evolutionary programming lacks the reference points needed to judge the closure rates of mechanical predators, traveling at velocities far exceeding any biological threat you might encounter in natural environments. The noise signature of approaching vehicles provides early warning of potential collision threats, but engine sounds can be misleading, indicators of vehicle size, speed, and arrival time. Motorcycles produce different acoustic signatures than trucks, while electric vehicles may provide little or no auditory warning of their approach until collision is imminent. Your defensive strategies against vehicle threats are limited to avoidance and evasion because direct confrontation with mechanical predators would be instantly fatal regardless of your fighting capabilities. The tactical approaches that work against biological threats become irrelevant when facing threats that can't be intimidated, injured, or discouraged through normal honey badger defensive techniques. The traffic pattern analysis required for safe road navigation involves understanding human transportation schedules and route usage patterns that follow completely different logic than biological predator behavior. Peak traffic periods, seasonal travel variations, and weather-related traffic changes create temporal patterns that must be learned and incorporated into your movement planning. Your escape route planning for road crossing situations must account for the limited options available when caught on pavement during vehicle approach. Unlike natural terrain where multiple escape directions are usually available, roads create linear threat environments where evasion options are restricted to crossing completion or retreat to the starting side. The psychological stress of navigating human-modified landscapes adds another layer of anxiety to your already overwhelming survival challenges. The constant awareness that you're operating in an environment filled with incomprehensible threats that can cause instant death affects your mental state and decision-making processes in ways that compound other survival pressures. Your territorial adaptation to human infrastructure requires developing new mental maps that incorporate artificial barriers, traffic hazards, and modified landscapes that change the tactical value of different areas within your range. Traditional hunting grounds may become inaccessible or too dangerous to use, while new opportunities might arise in areas disturbed by human activity. The fence damage to your hide creates infection risks and healing challenges that add to your medical burden during periods when your body can least afford additional stress. Wire cuts can become seriously infected if they're contaminated with rust, agricultural chemicals, or other substances commonly found on fence materials. Trash pit, temptation, and poison bait. The rich, complex bouquet of scents rising from the human refuse site creates an almost irresistible attraction that triggers every survival instinct you possess. Because buried within that cocktail of decay and chemical signatures are the unmistakable odors of protein, fat, and carbohydrates in concentrations that could represent more nutrition than you've encountered in weeks of conventional hunting. Your approach to the trash pit requires the same tactical caution you would employ when investigating any potentially dangerous food source. But the artificial nature of human refuse introduces unknown variables and chemical hazards that your evolutionary programming provides no guidance for assessing or avoiding. The visual survey of the refuse site reveals a chaotic landscape of plastic containers, metal objects, organic waste in various stages of decomposition, and unidentifiable substances that could represent either nutrition opportunities or toxic threats. Your ability to distinguish between safe and dangerous items based on scent alone becomes crucial when visual inspection provides insufficient information for risk assessment. Your scent analysis of the garbage reveals layers of information that include both promising food signatures and alarming chemical warnings that suggest the presence of substances that could be harmful or potentially lethal if consumed. The challenge lies in separating legitimate nutrition opportunities from materials that smell appealing but carry hidden dangers. The spoiled meat fragments scattered throughout the refuse create an obvious temptation for a protein-starved predator, but the bacterial loads and chemical preservatives in decomposing human food waste introduce disease risks that could prove more dangerous than the starvation they're meant to address. Your immune system, already compromised by poor nutrition, may be unable to handle the bacterial challenges present in rotting garbage. Your exploration technique involves careful investigation of individual items rather than indiscriminate consumption, using your highly developed sense of smell to identify materials that seem safe and nutritious, while avoiding obvious chemical hazards or substances with alarming odor signatures that suggest toxicity or contamination. The plastic contamination throughout the refuse site creates mechanical hazards that could cause serious injury or death if consumed accidentally. Plastic fragments, bottle caps, and synthetic materials mixed with organic waste create choking hazards and intestinal blockage risks that could prove fatal even if the organic components of your scavenged meal are nutritionally beneficial. Your awareness of potential poison bait situations requires constant vigilance for materials that smell appealing but may have been deliberately treated with toxins designed to eliminate problem wildlife. The same attractive scents that draw you to potentially valuable food sources could be masking anticoagulants, heavy metals, or other poisons intended to kill scavenging animals. The chemical taste detection that serves as your last line of defense against consuming toxic materials becomes crucial when visual and olfactory inspection fails to reveal the presence of dangerous substances. Your ability to detect off flavors, metallic tastes, or chemical signatures through oral sampling could prevent potentially fatal poisoning, but this technique requires exposing yourself to small quantities of unknown substances. Your feeding strategy in the refuse environment involves sampling small quantities of promising materials while monitoring for immediate adverse reactions that might indicate toxicity or contamination. This cautious approach reduces the risk of serious poisoning, but also limits your ability to take full advantage of genuinely safe nutrition opportunities. The bacterial ecosystem thriving in decomposing garbage represents both opportunity and threat, because while some bacterial action actually improves the digestibility of certain organic materials, other bacterial populations produce toxins that could cause serious illness or death if consumed in sufficient quantities. Your defensive exit strategy becomes crucial when human activity threatens to discover your presence at the refuse site, because humans who find wildlife raiding their garbage often respond with lethal control measures designed to eliminate problem animals permanently. Your escape routes must account for human detection capabilities and response patterns that differ significantly from natural predator threats. The nutritional assessment of scavenged garbage requires careful evaluation of caloric content versus contamination risks, because materials that appear highly nutritious may carry hidden costs in the form of digestive problems, toxic exposure, or disease transmission that could negate any short-term nutritional benefits. Your territorial intelligence regarding refuse sites must include detailed knowledge of human waste disposal schedules, site access patterns, and the temporal factors that influence both food availability and human presence risks. Timing your scavenging activities to minimize human contact, while maximizing access to fresh refuse, requires understanding human behavioral patterns. The long-term health consequences of regular garbage consumption could include chronic exposure to chemicals, plastics, and other contaminants that accumulate in body tissues over time, creating delayed health problems that might not manifest until damage is irreversible. Your contamination assessment must distinguish between materials that are simply unpalatable and those that are genuinely dangerous, because the desperation of starvation can override normal taste preferences and lead to consumption of materials that should be avoided, regardless of nutritional content. The social dynamics of refuse site scavenging involve competition with other opportunistic species, including domestic dogs, cats, and various wildlife that may be more experienced with garbage exploitation and less hesitant about consuming questionable materials. Your recovery plan for potential poisoning incidents is limited to natural detoxification processes and behavioral modifications that might minimize toxin absorption. Because veterinary intervention is obviously unavailable for wild animals experiencing accidental poisoning from human refuse consumption. Nightfall shift in predators. The setting sun doesn't bring relief from danger. It simply initiates a changing of the guard in the ongoing war for survival. As the diurnal predators that have been hunting you all day retreat to their evening rest, while an entirely new roster of nocturnal killers emerges from hiding places to begin their own deadly patrol schedules. Your transition planning between day and night hunting phases requires detailed knowledge of the overlap periods when both shifts of predators might be active simultaneously, creating windows of maximum danger where encounters with multiple threat categories become statistically probable. The 30 minutes before and after sunset represent peak risk periods when your survival depends on perfect situational awareness and flawless tactical execution. The acoustic landscape transforms dramatically as darkness approaches, with the daytime chorus of birds and insects giving way to the night sounds of hunting mammals, calling owls, and the distant vocalizations of large predators beginning their evening activities. Your ability to interpret these changing sound patterns provides crucial intelligence about which threats are becoming active and where they might be concentrating their hunting efforts. The insect activity surge that accompanies nightfall creates both opportunities and complications for your survival strategy. The increased availability of invertebrate prey provides potential nutrition sources, but the rising buzz of mosquitoes, gnats, and other biting insects adds another layer of constant irritation and potential disease transmission to your already overwhelming array of survival challenges. Your night vision capabilities while superior to most mammals, still represent a significant disadvantage compared to the specialized nocturnal predators who will be hunting during the dark hours ahead. Leopards, caracals, and various owl species possess sensory adaptations that give them overwhelming advantages in nighttime encounters, making darkness a time for extra caution rather than increased activity. The hyena activity patterns that typically peak during late evening hours force you to modify your movement routes and territorial patrol schedules to minimize intersection with pack hunting activities. The distinctive whooping calls that signal hyena pack coordination provide early warning of group predator movement, but they also indicate that large areas of your territory may become temporarily inaccessible due to predation risk. Your scent detection capabilities become even more crucial during nighttime navigation when visual cues are limited and the chemical signatures of various threats provide your primary intelligence about predator locations and recent activity patterns. The night air often carries scents more effectively than daytime conditions, giving you better long-range threat detection, but also making your own scent more detectable to hunting predators. The behavioral adjustments required for nighttime survival include modifications to your movement patterns, hunting techniques, and defensive strategies that account for reduced visibility and the different hunting styles employed by nocturnal predators. Your normally aggressive and confrontational approach to threats may need to be replaced by stealth and avoidance tactics that reduce your chances of detection. Your territorial familiarity becomes a critical survival asset during dark hours when visual landmarks are difficult to distinguish and navigation must rely heavily on memorized terrain features, scent markers, and tactical knowledge of escape routes that can be executed effectively even in complete darkness. The fatigue management challenges created by extended activity periods become more complex when day hunting must transition seamlessly into night survival without adequate rest breaks. Your energy reserves, already strained by daytime hunting efforts, must somehow sustain continued vigilance and periodic activity throughout the night hours. Your sleeping strategy during darkness requires finding secure locations that provide protection from nocturnal predators, while maintaining escape route access and reasonable comfort for whatever rest you can manage between threat assessments and necessary movement activities. The temperature differential between day and night creates both relief from heat stress and new challenges related to maintaining body temperature during cooler hours when your metabolism may already be compromised by poor nutrition, dehydration. Your hunting opportunities during evening hours focus primarily on prey species that become active at dusk or early night, requiring knowledge of the behavioral patterns and habitat preferences of nocturnal animals that might represent accessible food sources despite the increased predation risks. The social dynamics of nocturnal predator communities involve complex territorial relationships and hunting partnerships that can create unpredictable threat patterns where individual predators might be encountered in unexpected locations or group configurations that weren't present during daylight hours. Your sensory prioritization shifts toward auditory and olfactory information sources that provide better intelligence about nighttime threats than visual observation, requiring mental adjustments and attention, focusing that differ significantly from daytime survival strategies. The psychological adjustment to nighttime survival involves managing the increased anxiety and hypervigilance that naturally accompany reduced visibility and heightened predation risk, because excessive stress responses can impair decision-making and reaction times when precision and speed are most crucial for survival. Leopard ambush, narrow escape, the sudden absence of normal environmental sounds, the complete, unnatural silence that settles over the landscape like a suffocating blanket provides the only warning you receive that one of Africa's most efficient killing machines has positioned itself within striking distance and is, quote, calculating the precise moment to transform you from predator into prey. Your immediate response to the ominous silence involves a rapid but controlled scanning sequence that balances the need for threat detection against the requirement to avoid sudden movements that might trigger an attack from a predator, whose entire hunting strategy depends on patience, stealth, and explosive acceleration at the critical moment. The leopard's approach represents evolutionary perfection in ambush predation, a combination of camouflaged positioning, movement, discipline, and prey behavior analysis that allows a large cat to materialize from apparently empty landscape with the suddenness of a natural disaster. Your survival depends entirely on detecting this threat before the leopard commits to its attack sequence. Your thick neck skin and low-slung body profile, which provide advantages against many predators, offer limited protection against a leopard's killing technique that involves powerful jaw pressure applied directly to the skull or neck vertebrae, with bite forces exceeding 400 pounds per square inch. The loose skin that saves you from other predators becomes irrelevant when facing crushing bite pressure that can fracture bones. The leopard's pounce unfolds with terrifying precision and speed that transforms the apparently peaceful environment into an explosion of violence and survival desperation. The big cat's approach covers several meters in a fraction of a second, with claws extended and jaws positioned for the killing bite that would normally end this encounter within seconds of its initiation. Your defensive twisting response, executed through pure instinct and adrenaline-fueled reaction speed, provides the split-second evasion that turns certain death into a fighting chance for survival. The rotational movement that your thick skin allows enables you to partially escape the leopard's initial grappling attempt while positioning yourself for counterattack opportunities. Your ferocious counterbites target the leopard's face and forearms, seeking to inflict enough damage to make continued attack more costly than tactical withdrawal. Your powerful jaws and sharp teeth can cause serious injury, even to a large predator, and your species' reputation for refusing to retreat from fights creates psychological pressure that might influence the leopard's commitment to sustained combat. The grappling sequence that follows the initial contact involves a desperate struggle where your smaller size becomes both disadvantage and advantage. Disadvantage because the leopard's weight and reach provide overwhelming physical advantages, but advantage because your compact build and low center of gravity make it difficult for the cat to maintain effective grappling positions. Your thick skin proves its evolutionary value during the brief but intense physical contact, preventing the leopard's claws from achieving the deep penetration that would cause immediately disabling injuries. The loose skin allows you to twist and turn within the predator's grasp, making it difficult for the cat to maintain the precise positioning needed for an effective killing bite. The mutual damage assessment that occurs during the brief combat exchange influences both participants' willingness to continue the encounter. Your counterbites have inflicted facial injuries that create pain and bleeding for the leopard, while the cat's claws and initial bite attempt have caused tissue damage and bruising that will affect your mobility and hunting effectiveness for weeks. Your escape sequence requires perfect timing and terrain utilization to create sufficient distance for safety, while the leopard recovers from the unexpected resistance and reassesses the cost-benefit ratio of continued pursuit. Dense vegetation, rocky terrain, or burrow access can provide the tactical advantages needed to complete your escape successfully. The adrenaline dump that follows your narrow escape creates immediate physiological effects that include uncontrollable shaking, rapid heartbeat, and disorientation that leave you temporarily vulnerable to other threats, while your body processes the stress, hormones, and neurochemical responses triggered by the life-threatening encounter. Your injury assessment reveals the tissue damage from leopard claws and bite pressure, including bruising around your neck and shoulders that will create chronic pain and reduced mobility for the extended healing period ahead. The leopard's attack has left you with functional impairments that will affect hunting efficiency and predator evasion capabilities. The psychological impact of surviving a leopard attack creates lasting changes in your threat assessment and behavioral patterns that will influence future survival decisions. The knowledge that you've been targeted by one of Africa's apex predators affects your confidence levels and risk tolerance in ways that could prove either beneficial or detrimental to long-term survival. Your territorial security evaluation must account for the presence of a leopard that has identified you as potential prey and demonstrated willingness to attempt predation. The big cat's continued presence in your area creates ongoing threat levels that require modified movement patterns and increased vigilance during future hunting and patrol activities. The recovery period following the leopard encounter involves managing both physical injuries and psychological stress, while maintaining the hunting and territorial activities necessary for continued survival. The energy required for healing must somehow be obtained through hunting activities that are now compromised by both injury limitations and increased predation awareness. Your future tactical planning must incorporate lessons learned from the leopard encounter, including improved early detection methods, better escape route preparation, and defensive positioning strategies that might provide advantages in similar future encounters with large predators. Solitude, no pack, no cooperative hunt. The crushing weight of absolute solitude becomes most apparent during moments of peak stress, when your survival depends entirely on decisions and actions that you must make alone, without the collective intelligence, shared vigilance, or coordinated response capabilities that pack hunting species take for granted in their daily struggle for existence. Your isolation from cooperative survival strategies means that every task essential for staying alive, scouting for prey, detecting threats, defending territory, finding water, and securing shelter, falls entirely on your individual capabilities without backup, assistance, or the luxury of specialized roles that make group survival so much more efficient and effective. The constant vigilance required for solitary survival creates a form of psychological exhaustion that pack animals never experience, because while they can rotate sentinel duties and share threat detection responsibilities, you must maintain maximum alertness levels throughout every waking moment, or risk missing the subtle cues that often provide the only warning of approaching danger. Your decision-making process lacks the collective intelligence and diverse perspectives that help pack hunters evaluate complex survival situations more accurately and develop better tactical responses to challenging threats or hunting opportunities. Every choice you make is based solely on your individual experience and judgment, with no opportunity for consultation or collaborative problem solving. The scent echoes that populate your territory provide the only form of social contact you experience, carrying chemical messages from other honey badgers whose territories overlap with yours, but who remain as isolated and self-reliant as you are. These molecular conversations represent the closest thing to community interaction available to your solitary species. Your sleep patterns reflect the harsh reality of solitary survival, with rest periods that are necessarily light, fragmented, and punctuated by frequent awakening for threat assessment. Pack animals can achieve deep, restorative sleep because other pack members maintain security watches, but your rest must always be partially vigilant and easily interrupted. The hunting challenges you face are magnified exponentially by the lack of coordinated pursuit strategies, prey herding techniques, or the ability to tackle prey species that might be vulnerable to group attack but remain inaccessible to individual predators. Your prey options are limited to animals you can successfully hunt and kill single-handedly. Your territorial defense responsibilities require you to patrol, mark, and defend boundaries that pack animals could monitor and secure much more efficiently through cooperative effort and coordinated response to territorial challenges. Every aspect of territory maintenance falls on your individual capabilities without assistance or support. The injury recovery process becomes extraordinarily dangerous for solitary animals because any impairment that affects hunting ability, predator evasion, or territorial defense creates vulnerability periods where your survival chances are dramatically reduced without pack support to compensate for temporary disabilities. Your knowledge accumulation and survival education depend entirely on individual experience and trial and error learning. Without the benefit of observing other pack members' techniques, learning from their successes and failures, or receiving instruction in specialized skills that could improve your survival effectiveness. The stress load of constant individual responsibility for every aspect of survival creates chronic psychological pressure that pack animals share among group members, distributing the mental burden of survival decision-making across multiple individuals rather than concentrating it entirely on single animals. Your emergency response capabilities are limited to individual tactics and strategies without access to the coordinated defensive maneuvers, diversionary tactics, or mutual assistance that pack animals can employ when facing overwhelming threats or survival crises that exceed individual coping abilities. The foraging efficiency limitations of solitary hunting mean that you must work much harder to obtain the same nutritional resources that pack hunters can secure through coordinated effort, creating energy expenditure patterns that leave less margin for error and fewer reserves for surviving difficult periods. Your social deprivation affects psychological health in ways that are difficult to measure but undoubtedly contribute to the overall stress load of survival. Because honey badgers are not entirely a social creatures, and the complete absence of meaningful social interaction represents an additional form of environmental stress. The tactical disadvantages of fighting alone become apparent during territorial disputes or predator encounters where multiple opponents or complex threat situations might be manageable through group coordination, but become overwhelming. Challenges for individual animals operating without backup or support. Your survival redundancy is essentially zero because there are no other individuals who can compensate for your mistakes, take over essential functions if you become incapacitated, or provide alternative approaches to survival challenges that exceed your individual capabilities or resources. The long-term sustainability of solitary survival strategies depends entirely on maintaining peak individual performance indefinitely, without the gradual capability decline and mutual support systems that allow pack animals to continue functioning effectively, even as age or injury compromises their individual abilities. Brief mating, encounter stress. The faint but unmistakable chemical signature of a female in estrus carries on the evening breeze like a biological siren call that triggers every reproductive instinct you possess. But responding to this rare opportunity requires abandoning territorial security and embarking on a dangerous journey that could easily result in death, even if successful mating never occurs. Your decision to pursue the distant estrus scent involves weighing immediate survival needs against the evolutionary imperative to reproduce, because while securing mating opportunities represents the ultimate biological success, the energy expenditure and predation risks involved in long-distance mate-seeking could prove fatal to an animal already operating on razor-thin survival margins. The trek toward the scent source takes you far beyond your familiar territory into areas where your tactical knowledge is limited, predator activity patterns are unknown, and emergency shelter options haven't been scouted or prepared. Every kilometer of travel toward a potential mating opportunity is a kilometer deeper into potentially hostile territory controlled by unfamiliar threats. Your mate-seeking journey attracts the attention of other males who have detected the same estrus signals and are converging on the same location with identical reproductive objectives, creating a situation where violent territorial competition becomes inevitable, regardless of whether successful mating opportunities actually materialize. The physical demands of long-distance travel, while maintaining peak fighting condition for territorial battles, represent enormous energy expenditures that your already depleted nutritional reserves can barely sustain. You must somehow arrive at the mating location with sufficient strength and aggression to compete successfully against other males who are equally motivated and equally desperate. Your first encounter with a competing male involves the kind of ritualized but potentially lethal aggression that determines mating access through direct physical confrontation. The opponent assessment process requires evaluating size, condition, fighting experience, and commitment levels while simultaneously preparing for combat that could result in serious injury or death for one or both participants. The territorial wrestling and chasing that precedes actual mating involves sustained high-intensity physical activity that burns calories at unsustainable rates while exposing both competitors to increased predation risk from the noise, scent, and disturbance created by honey badger combat activities in unfamiliar territory. Your fighting technique must balance maximum aggression against injury prevention, because while defeating rivals requires total commitment to combat, sustaining serious injuries during territorial disputes could prove fatal during the dangerous return journey to your home territory or compromise your ability to defend existing territorial claims. The brief window of female receptivity creates intense time pressure that transforms what might otherwise be extended territorial negotiations into urgent, high-stakes combat, where delayed resolution could result in missing mating opportunities entirely despite successful rival displacement. Your energy calculation during mating encounters involves burning enormous quantities of calories through travel, fighting, and reproductive activity, while operating in territories where hunting opportunities are unfamiliar and potentially limited by competition from local predators and established territorial honey badgers. The female's mate selection criteria include assessment of male condition, fighting ability, and territorial quality that you must somehow demonstrate while competing against rivals who may be in better physical condition or possess superior fighting experience and territorial resources. Your mating success probability depends not just on defeating competitors and impressing females, but on timing reproductive activities to coincide with peak female fertility, while maintaining sufficient energy reserves for successful return travel to your home territory. The vulnerability created by reproductive focus and exhaustion from fighting makes both participants targets for opportunistic predators who may be attracted by the noise and scent signatures of honey badger mating activities, creating additional survival challenges during an already stressful and dangerous period. Your territorial abandonment during mating expeditions creates opportunities for competitors to encroach on your home territory, potentially resulting in permanent territorial losses that could affect long-term survival prospects, even if the mating expedition proves reproductively successful. The post-mating energy crash that follows successful reproductive encounters leaves you temporarily weakened and disoriented in unfamiliar territory, creating maximum vulnerability periods when predation risk is highest and your defensive capabilities are compromised by exhaustion and distraction. Your return journey to familiar territory must be completed while operating at reduced physical capacity and carrying the metabolic burden of reproductive energy expenditure, making the trip home potentially more dangerous than the initial mate-seeking expedition. The uncertain reproductive outcomes of mating encounters mean that enormous energy investments and survival risks may produce no actual reproductive success, making each mating attempt a high-stakes gamble where failure represents wasted resources that could have been devoted to immediate survival needs. The timing conflicts between optimal mating opportunities and seasonal survival challenges create situations where reproductive success and individual survival may represent competing priorities that require difficult strategic decisions about resource allocation and risk acceptance. Pregnancy, energy deficit. The gradual weight gain that signals successful reproduction should represent biological triumph, but for a honey badger operating on survival margins that were already impossibly thin, pregnancy transforms every aspect of daily existence into an increasingly desperate struggle where two lives depend on hunting success that becomes more difficult with each passing day. Your slightly expanded abdomen affects heat dissipation efficiency in ways that compound the already overwhelming challenges of thermoregulation in the harsh African environment. The additional body mass creates more internal heat while reducing your ability to lose excess temperature through surface area that is now partially dedicated to supporting developing offspring rather than survival maintenance. The metabolic demands of supporting fetal development require nutritional resources that your body simply doesn't possess, creating a cruel biological equation where successful pregnancy depends on obtaining calories and nutrients that are increasingly difficult to secure through hunting activities that become less efficient as pregnancy progresses. Your hunting effectiveness begins to decline almost immediately as the physical changes of pregnancy affect your balance, agility, and endurance in ways that reduce capture success rates for prey species that were already difficult to hunt under optimal conditions. Each failed hunt represents calories that cannot be recovered and nutrition that both you and your developing offspring desperately need. The need for secure nursery dens creates additional territorial requirements and excavation demands that compete with hunting activities for your limited time and energy resources. The search for suitable denning sites must be balanced against immediate survival needs, while accounting for the approach of birthing deadlines that cannot be postponed or delayed. Your vulnerability during pregnancy extends beyond the obvious physical limitations to include changes in scent signatures that may advertise your condition to predators who recognize pregnant prey as easier targets, and behavioral modifications that reduce your aggressive responses to threats that would normally trigger immediate defensive reactions. The safety versus foraging conflict becomes increasingly acute as pregnancy progresses, and your need for secure shelter conflicts with the requirement to maintain hunting activities that provide the calories needed to sustain both your own survival and fetal development. Both needs are essential, but satisfying one often compromises the other. Your territorial defense capabilities are compromised by pregnancy-related physical limitations that reduce your ability to patrol boundaries effectively, mark territory adequately, and respond aggressively to territorial challenges from competitors who may sense opportunity in your reduced defensive capacity. The timing pressures of pregnancy create non-negotiable deadlines for securing adequate food resources, completing nursery den preparation, and establishing territorial security that cannot be extended or modified based on environmental conditions or hunting success rates that remain beyond your direct control. Your energy reserves, which were never adequate for comfortable survival even before pregnancy, must now support additional metabolic demands, while your hunting efficiency decreases and your territorial security requirements increase, creating mathematical impossibilities that must somehow be resolved through perfect execution of survival strategies. The risk assessment calculations that govern every survival decision become more complex during pregnancy because choices that might be acceptable risks for an individual animal become unacceptable when they could affect offspring survival. Yet avoiding all risks might result in nutritional deficits that are equally harmful to reproductive success. Your sleep requirements increase during pregnancy at exactly the time when territorial vulnerability and hunting pressures demand maximum vigilance and activity levels, creating irreconcilable conflicts between biological needs and environmental demands that must be managed through impossible compromises. The physical discomfort of advanced pregnancy affects concentration and decision-making abilities during the period when survival choices are most critical and margin for error is smallest, because poor decisions during pregnancy can result in the loss of both individual and reproductive investment. Your nutritional priorities must somehow balance immediate survival needs against fetal development requirements, while operating within caloric budgets that were inadequate for individual survival even before the additional demands of Quitewint and Diz. Pregnancy were factored into the survival equation. The territorial modifications required for successful reproduction include establishing multiple secure den sites, creating safe travel corridors between hunting and denning areas, and maintaining defensive perimeters that protect nursery areas without consuming excessive energy or time resources. Your predator avoidance strategies must be adapted to account for reduced mobility, altered escape capabilities, and modified behavioral patterns that affect your ability to detect, evade, or defend against threats that represent danger to both you and your developing offspring. The approach of birthing deadlines creates increasing urgency around all pregnancy-related preparations, while hunting pressures and territorial demands continue at normal intensity, requiring time management and energy allocation strategies that exceed normal honey badger capabilities under optimal conditions.